Nothing.
Nothing. All right, I'm gonna go get my mouse.
We're way before we continue on with the session, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Buck.
With Mr. Buck.
Okay. All right, Shane, it's yours, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I want to start by saying thank you to staff. Done a lot of work to this point and also have put in a little extra effort to get me up to speed. I've made it through about 90% of where I need to be on the budget materials, and I'm finishing off a little bit. But they've done a great effort to document. Excited for us to go through the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda. We're going to, Sean, did you have anything to add first?
No, I echo that. Get it in place. Hard work on it. Amanda and Jess will handle premieres.
Thank you guys very much. Good to see everyone again. It's that time of year, some of your favorite times of year. So since we did send out the draft, we do have some changes. We've got some updated numbers from Wake County on property estimates. So real estate has gone down a little bit. Vehicles, however, have gone up. So we're kind of looking at getting about 210 from that. They do have a May 15th filing deadline for any appeals. So really what they're looking at for that is primarily commercial. There's commercial appeals. They think that's going to be kind of that deadline for that. So we potentially may have another minor change depending on what comes after that deadline. We had a small increase in the property lease at Olive Farm. There was a recommendation to increase that rent. And then pending, we still have our SRO contract with the county that Chief Armstrong is working with them on to renegotiate, and PAL. So we've got our PAL funding formula, but they are talking about doing increasing the allocation for PAL funding, which would increase that calculation. I'm sorry, I have a terrible headache. So I'm working through a sinus infection and it's making it very difficult. On the expenditure side, in terms of personnel, we were notified that we got the lead for NC Fellow for the DEI position. So what we've done is we've converted those costs, personnel costs, to the contract for that placement. Community Development and Neighborhood Connections has kind of worked through their game plan to prioritize the customer convenience. Community Connections, the 311 call center, the call center, to prioritize that. So what they're looking to do is push out the neighborhood improvement specialist, which was originally slated for this year, and replace that with 2 part-time benefited customer service representatives, which would get them for this year so that they could stagger the hours. Also, we were notified that Felton Grove is going to get pushed out construction, so we will be able to push out 2 SROs that were originally slated for replacement with that high school. So we'll use that to offset some of the allocation of fund balance. So we've got the allocation of fund balance down to about 2 million now. The presentation is based on what was provided to you guys in the draft that's out there, so that if anybody's kind of paying attention, they can follow along and not get confused about why things are different. We've also increased the vision benefit, and then we have minor remodel costs for the call center as they move downstairs. And then we had some facility contract additions in fire for public safety, Station 6 and fire admin that didn't get carried over into their budget requests. So we've got that updated as well. So we are back rebalanced. That's it. So we are currently balanced 216, slight increase. We've got 32 cents set as the tax rate with that. You guys had said a range between 32 and 35. So we do have it balanced right now at 32. It is 12 cents in our current rate, but it is 1.8 cents over the calculated revenue neutral rate. Residential electric rates, we're looking at a minor increase to the base charge and about 14% to the energy charge. Water and sewer rates, we're looking at 4% to base and volumetric for each one of those. So some of those highlights. Going through to general fund revenues, we do see an increase. The majority of that is going to be tied to the ad valorem taxes. because of the substantial growth in our tax base, with the reval. So, we originally had allocated 2.8 million from the, a fund balance, for the FY 25 year. We have since reduced that down to about 2 million. So that's a positive. Because the other thing that we had that I forgot to mention was, we have updated workers' comp numbers, which dropped, that added about, 150,000 back.
Ask a question.
Sure.
So on the general funds.
We're about to go to it. You're getting ahead of me.
Sorry,
So,
I'll hold that question.
it'll be the next, yes, the next slide. So, with the general fund revenues, here, basically, this does not include the other financing sources, which is basically transfers. And, this kind of shows the ad valorem tax, kind of what that growth percentage is, the other license and, taxes, which is basically our sales tax. And then all other general fund revenue, which is your sales and service permits and fees, miscellaneous, investment earnings. And so you're kind of starting to see that trend out. And then I feel like this kind of tells, that story as well. You're looking at all of our other unrestricted, intergovernmental, restricted governmental permits and fees, sales and services, investment earnings and miscellaneous, kind of flattening out. So the big jump that you see in investment earnings is because we went from like 95,000 to like 2.5 million. Sales and service is driven primarily by what, parks recreation fees, field rentals, facility rentals, and also our solid waste fees, because that grows with the cost increases that we pass through with our contracts, and then also our customer base. You'll continue to see that kind of trend up. One thing that is, important to note is the increase in the restricted intergovernmental. Part of that is tied to fire, and that is our, cost share allocation from Wake County. They've agreed to cost share on, 6 additional positions this year and 6 next year. So that increased their allocation to us over time. So disclaimer, this is literally based on debt. This is based on development growth, CIP, compensation plans that have been put out previously. So none of these are confirmed. Nobody's published on a tax rate because we're Apex. Of course, we're going to be the first. Raleigh isn't until the end of the month, the 21st. Garner's the 7th, Holly Springs the 14th. Fuquay, I think, is the 6th. And then the county's not going until the 13th, but this is kind of a rough idea in terms of what their revenue neutral rate is and then what they're looking at. So we know Holly Springs will have 3 for bonds. We know Fuquay will have 2 for bonds. So we know based on kind of what they have going on that this is a good estimation. So in case you're wondering where we're sitting at, and that was requested by Mr. Mack as well. So previously, before the new numbers, the $0.01 on the tax rate was 1.935. So the amended is 1.92, and likely be amended once. In terms of general fund rates, solid waste fees, our contract costs cap it at 2.5% CPI. Again, we are going to go up 2.5% on the CPI. The processing fee that they started a few years ago has not changed. It's still $1.34 this year. So this is one of the years the only year since they've implemented that has not changed. So on average, you're looking at our average residential customer seeing about 35-cent increase monthly. The bold numbers here are FY25 numbers. The rest of them are FY24. You're wondering what that distinction was. So the property tax discussion, I figured we would have probably later on, but it is still a decision.
Just the indicator in the upper right-hand corner, those are decision points. So whether there's dialogue as we go through or all at the end, you can refer back to, those are key decisions.
I guess on this slide, I'll ask, something I brought up the last time we talked about this was why aren't we increasing our yard waste costs that we, heard from staff that we're not quite recovering here. And I think at the time you said maybe we'll do some more calculations, see what the correct rate would be.
Yes.
Do you have any other information on that? Or are we still just thinking we're good? For
I
this
don't.
year?
But I'm happy to write a memo on it. So I'll do some analysis and get a memo out to you guys.
Yeah.
So I've gotten, some of the data and information from Mr. Mullis. And so we'll go through and do the analysis, and then the other thing we wanted to look at was the different types of property. Because you guys had talked about potentially looking at different rates depending on type.
And the reason I keep bringing up my only concern is that when this calculation is done, if we find out that we are 30% behind recreation, is at that point, okay, we gotta raise it $6. Like, that's painful. Like, if we know we're far underneath, I think it's better to glide up to the rate, a little bit each year as opposed to taking a big step in the year.
So what was kind of touched on in finance committee was, that we were just holding the rate at this point in time. I presented it to them, that I held the rate at this time because we needed to look at some different things, but then also, some of the process changes that we were doing. In terms of ordinance changes, we needed to see what that impact would be so that we'd have a better idea of what. So if contractors aren't allowed to, put yard waste out anymore, what does that do to our loads? Because that directly impacts our cost.
That would presumably lead to a significant, lag time in getting that data, right? Because we're not gonna really see that materialize until we're like, have 6 months of data or so to compare to last year. So,
I think they're getting estimates on that though, based on they've changed some of their operations to take a look at what some of that.
because like
Impacts
to, Mr. Madden's point, like if we want to make a change, we gotta do it now, right? Before we pass the budget. So, and if we know that we're already $1 million in the hole, which is kind of what came out of the last conversation about solid waste removal, like yard waste in particular, then does it make sense just to kind of assume a slight increase here, slightly more than the 35 cents to start closing that gap and then kind of reassess where we are and see, how much more we gotta cover, right? Instead of doing it in one big step next year, right? Because next year, that will be amplifying to pay next year. So I guess the question is like, how fast do we think we can have some assessment, right? Can we get it done in the next 2 weeks before the next budget session? But we can include it in this year's budget, or, are we basically passing the opportunity and deferring the conversation by a year?
Yes, also understanding, yes, I can have something to you in the next couple of weeks. So also, this isn't something that the tax rate is the only thing that we have a hard deadline on. We still have opportunity to change any of our rates and fees anytime throughout the year. So it's not, those are ones that are adopted by you all, and because we bill them, we're not relying on somebody else to build them either.
Makes sense.
Yes, on this topic, this program may change in the future quite a bit. And so have we thought about the glide path possible to that, either higher or lower, or how that's going to affect if we do the bin thing in the future or whatever, and the area drops stuff off, like how will that change this? And like, can we avoid a big jump 1 year to do it now, or that kind of thing? I'm wondering.
I always advocate for a little increase incrementally, till you get there. And I think the council member Zimmerman's comment, I think it depends on what council's level of subsidy is. You could raise it $1.50, you'd still have a subsidy, most likely, but it's council's decision on really, I think, what subsidy amount they want. The program is not going to get any less expensive. There's nothing we can do to lessen the program cost. So I think, and to Amanda's point, this is something that council can take action on because it's a fee-based structure. But I certainly think it's really a discussion about how much level of subsidy that council wants to entertain.
mean, it's a utility fund, so zero, right?
The solid waste is not an enterprise fund. It's set up in the general fund, so it doesn't operate the same as water sewer.
But in principle, you want your utility funds to be, operations self-supporting. Like ideally, there wouldn't be a subsidy, and you'd want we bill our customers to reflect the cost of the service, you know.
So, I mean, and maybe just do the calculation. So based on existing rates, based on previous conversation, the current subsidy is about $1 million. That's correct. So what if we decide to add another dollar to our solid waste collection fees? How does that number shrink? You know, are we talking 750,000? Are we talking 500,000? Like, you know, where does the subsidy land? So we do this kind of in increments because we know we need to get there anyways, right? Give it a couple months to kind of see how the new UDO restrictions work through in terms of our cost profile. And then, you know, we'll just, you know, worry about the rest of the gap at some later time. But to continue to run with a basically $1 million deficit, I think is not appropriate.
So more to come, Amanda will support that. Okay.
Yeah, and I think to Amanda's point is, Councilmember, that this actually does not done right now. Like we set it in the budget, but we can change it in July, we can change it in September, we can change it in October. It's the tax rate that's fixed on July 1.
And that makes sense, right? I just don't want to undercount by a year, right? And that's not have this conversation still a year from now.
Want to be cautious that we have the opportunity to do some additional analysis so that we're presenting something to you that with a long range plan, with a guide plan, with methodology kind of tied to it. So there's better understanding what we're trying to accomplish.
I thought the water and sewer things we've been doing, kind of evening that out, it's been really nice because it's been gradual and it's kind of gotten things that are aligned over time too. So yeah, it's a good model to follow, I would say, for this if we can.
So, so I'll get that to you within 2 weeks. Are you guys okay with the garbage and recycling rates? They're just a pass through.
Yeah.
Checking it out. I'm gonna let Jessica go through some of the fee schedule changes. She did hand out a copy of the fee schedule to you. That's just so that you've got a reference point since this is what we do with finance committee with page numbers. So that it'll reference back to those particular page numbers that you have.
There's a lot of changes on the fee schedule this year, and most of that has to do with labor inflation and availability, adjustments based on comparables around Wake County, and what fees are being charged. And then there's a few fee additions as well. So all the ones up here are for labor and inflation. A lot of them are around labor increases. Exception requests have increased significantly, which increases staff time and the resources required. Stormwater, soil, and erosion control plan review fees. This is purely inflation. The last update was in 2014, so this is getting us up to par for today. Underground service and lateral fees, those are labor and material increases. It also requires larger transformers than we used to have to purchase due to increase in home size and electric vehicle chargers. We have water tap and meter fees that have increased due to availability and variability of cost when those do come in stock. We have utility fees increase in wastewater there's an increase in the cost to actually analyze wastewater. There is outdoor lighting, which has also increased due to energy cost increases and materials for maintenance. Based on comparison for Wake County, other municipalities, we've updated the development submittal fees, water system management plan and pump station reviews, water and sewer inspection fees, commercial building permits, 1 and 2 family dwelling permit fees, and the Parks and Rec facilities field and splash pad fees. Additionally, there's been some additions. These are all based on staff time and resources. So these are all new ones. So a lot of them are based on stormwater coming online, fully functional. So there's some new fees for that. There's some new parks and rec fees due to demand, and additionally, the special events policy being adopted. So we pulled the fees out of the policy and put them in the fee schedule so that it's a living document. It's updated every year so that the fees can also be updated with that, as opposed to readopting a policy every year when you want to update those fees.
PV, solar, PV.
That's on the next slide. Got its own slide.
You're always just one or two
No.
slides.
Like a eager beaver.
You might want to have your paper, before we get into move ahead.
Okay, I'll go read ahead.
Another fee, something that jumped out to me going through the fee schedule was the change for the annexation petition, bringing an extra $100 for well septic failure. I'm curious why that matters for someone applying for annexation, why they would charge an extra $100 for that.
Diane?
And I think.
Diane?
I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
I can't hear.
I can't hear anything back here.
It's
I
about.
haven't heard anything.
I was just curious about the annexation petition fees. There's an extra $100 for a well or septic failure on the fee schedule. I'm just curious as to why we would charge an extra $100. There's some additional.
I don't think it's extra, wasn't that we were keeping it the same price? $200.
Oh, I have it backwards. So it's cheaper for well septic failure. Yes.
Yeah, I
My
thought,
bad.
yeah.
They're both in red. It threw me for a loop. That makes sense. Sorry. That's good. I like charging less people. Okay.
Sorry, I don't have a copy in front of me. I was like, oh, I'm not. So this is the solar, PV edition. Previously, you guys had elected to, remove this from the fee schedule, and not charge for it to, support solar, efforts. Finance committee was split, on the decision to charge this or not charge this. So, that's why it's kind of coming to you guys without that recommendation. This is the breakdown of cost from the electric department in terms of what the actual cost is for the, to install a meter. It doesn't include the staff time associated with application reviews, any of the permit setup, any of the inspections or the work order. So this is just literally the electric meter, the guy that installs it, and the vehicle that he uses to install it.
You got the numbers on hand about how many there were last year? You got some?
No,
No offense.
Okay.
Probably. I think they're getting about 80 a month or something at one time.
Right?
Yeah, well, that,
About 80 a month or
80 a
something.
month, okay.
So. A year ago, we had a conversation about solar. There were about 800 customers. So are we suggesting that we have over 2,000 solar users now?
I'm gonna see if I can verify that, but tell you that to look.
Thank you.
for 1,000. They also typically have an assortment of application spending as well.
I get a sense of scale here, right? Like if we don't do this, like what are we leaving on the table? And versus essentially subsidy.
80 times 12 times 300 for the year, right?
80 seems like a very.
80 a month.
Yeah.
Well, you've seen that chart that shows the really big upward trend in them. I mean, it actually is.
That may be too high. I'm trying to verify here. Taking a minute, let's move on. That's something.
Can we circle back on this one?
Rudy, do you by chance have idea how many you're seeing?
Oh,
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to look at it right now.
No. You all are aware that this fee goes to the electric fund, right? This is an expense to electric fund and a revenue that would be to the electric utility.
I think part of that, there are two decisions or two, it's subsidy or not, and then the source of the subsidy, which currently it comes from the electric fund. Really, it's not we look at it different ways. This is a town initiative, not an electric, like an enterprise fund effort. But a subsidized effort.
Pays for installing of LED lighting and new solar on town buildings.
So LED lighting currently is electric. The town solar is general fund.
That's it.
So can we hear from the finance committee about the split decision? About that?
Yeah, I was opposed to adding the feedback and Mayor Pro Tem was supportive. I think like some context here might be helpful because we removed this fee, was it 2018, 2017? It was part of an initiative at Town of Apex to encourage solar adoption, where a variety of fees, I think this isn't the only one, and there's several other ones. The policy that we put in place back then. And I mean, this would be a reversal of that policy and it's just not something I was in favor of doing at some point, certainly, but I think it's working well. I like the fact that Apex is viewed as one of the most solar friendly, if not the most solar friendly community in the state. And I think we've won awards and gotten all sorts of, probably from solar companies, raising our position on solar adoption. That's something I'm proud of and I, haven't been inclined to remove it at the moment.
And my thoughts were we're on a path where we're gonna have to do it. And to me, I think we still have plenty of incentives to encourage solar use. But doing it, I take we bite the bullet now approach on this one. And when we were starting to look at some of our longer term costs and some of the other things that we're going to have to start chewing on this one, I see us having a real big cliff that's going to come up when we start looking at these fees and a bunch of other fees all kind of culminating at around 2028. That's something that I think we need to start thinking about addressing now. And this is an easier way to start dealing with that. I mean, I'm certainly not saying, oh yeah, we shouldn't encourage solar or anything like that. We should. But we're gonna have to start paying for stuff soon.
But what other fees are in the mix here, right? So rather than focusing on solar, is there another fee that would be like kind of has outlived its credit function?
And I think that's something that if we could find another source, I think that would be great. I think kind of ask staff to kind of take a look and find out what other options were out there, but I don't know if that's gonna be enough. Honestly, I don't.
Can I ask a solar or more of a context question? There was a solar policy discussion that I'm not sure we resolved, or did we, about going forward, what we're gonna do with the net metering and the two-way metering, whatever. And like, we talked about it, but we were not in agreement. So it kind of got left, it stayed the same, I think, right? And where are we on that too? I'm kind of wondering, is there a cliff?
Depending on the ERP upgrade and the meter upgrade, it's order to do the time of use.
Okay.
Charges.
Right, it was the meter thing, that's right.
So, and we agreed to keep the base fee for all customers. Right, so instead of going below zero or below the $26 base fee, I think we decided that we wanted to apply the base fee to all customers. So you basically, your bill will always be $26. And if your net use is zero.
That was in the budget, okay, so
I think that also is depending on the billing system, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right now, like, it's all tied up in what the billing system can handle.
And when's the metering thing gonna get finished? Do we know that?
That is in progress. So we're trying to get the infrastructure set up now. We're setting a poll this week, as a matter of fact, as far as the overall infrastructure. And then the next phase is kind of the pilot stage. And then it will begin, but it'll take, a year and a half or more to actually get all the meters and get everything implemented, get it in place. But the ERP is not going to be finished till, I think, later in the fall. So then all it's going to have to tie back together. Ultimately, when it's set up, the metering setup that we'll have is you'll be able to get all kind of metering information, right? So net metering is really about you charging and paying back the same rate. That's really what net metering is at the end of the day. You've got a one line, you have a positive or a negative reading versus net billing is where you can have a rate that is being purchased and a rate which is being bought back, and those can be two different rates, higher or lower.
There might be changes with that in the future. We haven't figured out yet that will make it a little bit worse for solar.
Right.
And was the context here that you may want to not pile this on with that
Yeah, but
in the same budget year?
yeah, in the same budget year, because I feel like then we're looking at a budget year to be coming up where we're gonna be dealing with this, some very necessary costs with regard to water, sewage. There's a, and kind of a crunch in terms of we're gonna hit a retirement sort of plug in there where we're gonna have a lot of folks who are gonna be on our personnel side, also gonna be a little bit more of an expense and cost. So, as I forecast myself out, I'm trying to figure out where can we make the painful but not as painful decisions as early as we can. Because I feel like 2027, 2028 is going to be just a hard budget year for us. And there's just a lot of stuff the problem is we have a lot of stuff that we like to do, but we've only got X amount of money. And we don't like raising taxes on folks, and we don't like impacting folks with knowing that we're gonna have increasing on property taxes, we're gonna have it. We recognize, and I think that's a good thing, we recognize as a council that there's only so much weight you can put on to the backs of the residents. And we all recognize that sometimes the glide path makes that increased weight a little easier to bear. My concern is that even with some of our glide paths and even some of the amount that we have coming up, we may be at a point where we're starting to look at, okay, what services do we no longer need to provide? What are the things that we do that make us really kind of special? We can't just afford to do it.
All right, I have you a couple quick data points. So we have 1,053 solar systems today. We have, as average, I was wrong on the numbers, 23 per month. And I apologize for such a high number, getting everybody all excited. It's 23 per month on average, 1,053 currently in the system. If you recall back in 23, when we last had a presentation, we had 806. That was as of, that was in April of 23. So a year ago, we had 800. Get back to this slide. The other key number, based on what the data we had before, we essentially lose $455 per solar customer in revenue. So that was the number provided by the consultant in April of last year. So you can see for every one we had, we're losing $455 in ongoing revenue. That's so per year.
So in terms of the subsidy, we're talking about $85,000 on the fees, right? So 23 times 12 times 300 is around 85,000. The lost revenues is slightly higher than that, right? It's 120,000 or so, which is still in the grand scheme of things, not a whole lot. Right, and so I kind of like, I'm with council member, I'm happy here about like, I'd like to continue to encourage solar adoption, right? If, however, we do like to see, I want to go straight back into solar deployments, right? In other words, transferring the income from the electric funds to the general funds to pay for our town solar adoption. Right, so keep the two very closely aligned.
So you're talking about transferring money from the electric fund to fund the town solar.
If we're going to charge this, right, and basically that creates a revenue stream for electric. Right, I'd like for it to be tied to our own solar deployments, right, which comes out of the general fund. So somehow that needs to.
To be clear, this isn't a revenue stream. This is a cost recovery.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's okay, it's money going into the electric.
But it's cost, it's money in, money out. It's not a revenue stream.
I mean, honestly, I think I'm with Councilmember Gray. I think we, at this point, need to be charging for our installs, our meter installs. So, and, the less that the more that we're recovering now, the less we have to recover later. Yeah. That's where I'm at.
I mean, I'll just say, so that if I can take a swing of this. Apex is like embracing of solar. It's who we are, right? It's fits with our values that we've articulated, in these meetings, in our strategic goals and all that stuff. Like this fits in with who we are. And I'd load a little bit to give it up, like for $85,000. I'd be okay, I think, if we were to reimburse the electric fund with general funds for that $85,000. If it's a matter of the electric enterprise fund being made whole, and that's an issue. That's not too bad for me. But I mean, $85,000 to me, I think is, it represents the level of investment we're willing to make in these type of initiatives. Something I'm proud of, and I'll be sad to see it go.
To me, that what matters for this is like, this is $280 per install that we're charging new people coming in, getting this done. So to me, it's not a huge ask for new solar customers coming in for $280 to get it installed. It's not like we're asking for them to pay $10,000 for it to be installed. We're asking for $280 for the meter to be installed to reimburse the people that go out and put it in.
And I just don't know if someone is saying, well, unless the town is paying for this, I'm just not gonna get it. I just don't think that's where we're at in terms of the psychology of this process. I do think when we start looking at this number, when we have to renegotiate our electricity's contract, and we're talking about what Duke is gonna charge for this, then this conversation becomes a lot more difficult, because I don't think this is the price that we're gonna be paying 2027 when we're looking at how much we've got to start buying this stuff back.
All right, so good discussion. Looks like we have two in agreement to the other side. Did you weigh in?
I have not weighed in yet.
Okay. All right.
Kind of wishy-washy, I guess, but I think what I would say is, I think people are making decisions based on of a $10,000 investment in solar, not on $300. They're making on the net metering thing. I think they're gonna make that decision on that and payback period with that. So that one I think was much more impactful. So I think I'm with Audra and Ed on that one, on this one.
Cool. Thank you for the discussion.
All right, so when we're looking at our expenditures and the breakdown of that, increase similar to revenues, 7%. So you see the breakdown continuing, our trends of public safety being the majority of that. For the general fund, we have decreased this amount of fund balance with the ERP transition, we've got kind of phase two, we've got the extension, and then we've got some additional add-ons, for services, that have been incorporated. So we're looking to allocate additionally for that. We've got the town solar, that's the 3-year plan at 670. The kind of start up with the Kids Town Park renovation to kind of see where we need to go with that. And then the South Salem bicycle connection, which may end up, I believe, was noted, Sean, as community funding, project funding.
Eventually, have we heard anything
Eventually.
else about that? You know,
What?
the community funding, like that bicycle, we haven't, yeah, it just, we got this random thought, like note that we might have received that, but then we haven't, we followed up, we haven't heard anything else yet, so.
Yeah, just real quick, in a budget that's been passed by Congress or in
Yes.
Yeah.
proposed thing?
No,
Okay.
it's been passed.
It was wrong, like.
Yeah.
Both, there's the water thing.
We received it, so we do have a sewer project that did
Yeah.
receive federal funding.
Okay,
Half were being in Representative Nickel and half were being in Representative
Yes.
Ross's district.
right.
Well, and that's all we heard about.
Yeah.
And then we received just a kind of pass through notice about, hey, when funds will be available. It wasn't about, it was a general note, blanket notice to everybody. And we looked and it was for us and related to the Salem bicycle project, which we did submit, but we never heard anything else on it. And so we're trying to hunt that down. We haven't got any feedback yet, so we're asterisk by it. We're still keeping it in the budget now, but, you know,
Fingers crossed.
yeah, if we find out, then great, but we just haven't heard anything.
So real quick on the solar, back to Arno's, what he said. So we've never paid for solar using electric fund money. It's always been general fund for the previous solar installations because of the type of uses that general fund versus that fund is allowable for that kind of thing.
Yes, yes, I am. So that was one of the questions, that was a discussion that we had, because this first phase is gonna be the electric, operations facility. So we had some discussion, but this is kind of more of a policy about where we wanna go. There's not truly a return on investment. So it's not like it is something that will benefit greatly the electric department.
Okay.
Not a
So-
business decision for that fund.
Right.
Okay.
So we have, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, finish your thought.
So I think like kind of going back to your question on the LED light upgrades and things, a lot of that has to do with like the infrastructure, installs, the actual street light costs, the charges for energy are actually paid out of the general fund. The capital costs are
So the
carried.
capital costs are carried by the electric funds, but
But the operating costs are covered by the general fund.
and so you talked about payback, right? Okay, we don't see a lot of return on investment on solar installs. Do we see it on the $500,000 we were going to invest in LED street light upgrades? Because if one is a higher ROI than the other, right, it should be doubled down on one versus the other, right? If streetlights have a higher return on investment, then maybe someone that's 670,000 needs to go there, so we reduce our consumption instead of increasing our generation. If it's the inverse, then maybe spend less on LED streetlight conversion and more on getting solar installed.
Return is much higher on the LED lights.
Yeah, like 5 years, something like that.
I remember I'm trying to get that answer right now, but it's in that 7-year window, I think, or less, 7 or less. Where there is really, there's not a payback on the solar. I mean, it's over 25
Streetlights are
years.
5. So streetlights are a 5-year return on investment rate for the underground.
So if you take solar, it's like 25-ish, which the panels are 20, so there really is no payback. It's more of a doing the right thing, green thing versus trying to save money. It's not a money thing.
And they have lower maintenance costs too, which is not LED lights last longer. That's why I wanted to do more for that actually, but you said that they're kind of tapped out.
Mr. Grants, again, asked if we could do $1 million a year for streetlights. And I said, we could, but not without, additional rate implications.
Yeah.
it would be, for us to do that, we would have to contract that out. We couldn't do it with our current staff and the current workload that we have with development. And particularly like the meeting, while the development's coming with the gradient, workload that's still bringing. So with the money, yes, we could do more, but without, the money would also have to include staffing resources.
So the 500,000 that really caps, you guys have staffing capacity. Be that
That
much
and
more.
just
And just money.
money.
Well,
It's a
I
combination
mean,
there.
again, if we were to consider the more of one versus the other, we can solve the money, but if you say, okay, let's, again, I'm only going to spend more on either external services or hiring staff, then that becomes kind of a moot point. Right, so,
I mean, if the question is like spending the money on actually installing the solar on the building or having someone help us do a contract to install LED lights, you're gonna get more payback on your LED lights based on my understanding.
I mean, we can kind of take this till we talk about the capital improvement plan, but I think that's something that we should consider.
Well, the LED lights are a 3-year deal versus 2 years.
Well, I just heard 5 years.
No, 5 years return. Oh, it's been 5 years total. Oh, I thought you said that, is it ROI 5 years or the program's been 5 years?
No, ROI is 5.
Yeah, okay. This has been ongoing since like 22.
We originally started so originally, in case you're wondering about inflation. So originally we had a 3-year plan at $250 a year.
That's right.
So that was the original plan. Now, electric is looking at a 3-year plan at $750 a year. So the costs have shifted certainly. So
What percentage of street lights are currently LED versus investment?
we have it mapped.
Yeah.
I'll have to get that.
Um,
We're a long ways from where we want to be.
So you can kind of see the trend over time. So we are seeing that trend of personnel costs going up, operating costs going up. The one kind of exception that we have here is under capital. You'll see this huge spike, and that is tied to a lot of budget amendments that year. We were very budget amendment friendly that year. We had the downtown property purchase. We did the budget amendment to go ahead and move $3.6 million for the Mason Street property. We had the Middle Creek, which was like an additional $800,000. Safe Routes to School Transit, and then also the budget amendment for the ERP, which was $3.2 million. So there was a lot of larger scale budget amendments that year that kind of contributed to those capital costs. So you can kind of see that here too. I'm afraid if I push something, I'm gonna turn this on. But so in here where you kind of see that spike over the expenditure over the revenues, but we can kind of continue to trend up. A lot of that's tied to the projects that you're wanting to see.
So expenditures is basically a combination of operating expenses and capital outlay for capital projects,
And personnel,
right?
so.
Operating expenses. So, okay,
Sorry. I think of it in
okay.
3 different areas:
Okay.
personnel, operating, and capital. Sorry.
right, okay. And, I kind of struggled with this reading through the budget document for kind of long. Year, big fluctuations often on the capital outlay, right? Whereas the operating expenses, personnel plus operating, show a very different trend, and it's hard to kind of tell that from the way that the document is laid out. So, not asking to change anything now, but kind of going forward, kind of having a different view, kind of where we separate cash flow, capital related cash flow with regular operating expenses. I think will be helpful.
So absolutely, we can do that. A lot of the capital items, sometimes, they fluctuate because of scheduling, they fluctuate because of, we have estimates and that's what you guys are kind of funding, then when we get the bids in, Beaver Creek is a perfect example. A lot of the Greenway projects, I mean, are coming in substantially over. So then we're doing additional budget amendments to cover that. So, so that's why we typically, what we'll do is we pull the actuals for historical, but I can send you some of that.
Yeah, and, you know, just to, like, I saw some departments that's on paper were going down, but in terms of budgets. Right, but when you look at the actual detail, it's because, like, we had a capital expenditure last year that is not happening this year, so. In terms of operating expense, personnel plus regular operating expense, they're still increasing, right, but it's not showing clearly in the
The total
numbers.
so you want
Total.
the total by department. So,
We can take it offline and, like, you know, let's teach your record.
So we are seeing that increase in personnel costs, as most of you are aware from Personnel and Finance Committee. A lot of that's tied to the retirement rate increases, that will probably likely continue to increase, on the employer side. Health insurance is going up 5.5%. We are seeing a slight decrease in dental insurance, which is very exciting. Less exciting is that it's only just over $8,000. So the impact isn't quite as exciting. So we should just refer to it as 2%. Sounds better, doesn't it? We've got the new position costs. Additionally, it's implementing the position study, which was public safety this year. We're looking at 2% market rate adjustment, as of July 1, 4% average merit, which would take effect in October, similar to the way we've done it in previous years. And then the additional cost, the lifestyle wellness payment. So that was kind of that's a shift in how we're handling that this year. As opposed to doing debit cards, we're looking at doing just direct payments. So it saves us the administration costs, but it also, takes out some of the, administration frustrations, what it can and cannot be used for, and where it does and does not work, which is the current debit card, process.
Okay, so again, looking through the department detail, I see some departments showing significant increases in employee expenses, even if there's no additional headcount being added to the department. So picking on our finance trends here a little bit, the finance department's going up 27% in employee expenses, but it's not adding new staff. Budget department's going up 16% without adding new staff. Whereas other departments have a much smaller increase rate that's a little bit more in line with the 6% comp increases. And then, I guess some of these other increases are really on different line items. Why is it not kind of like the standard flat rate of 6% across the board?
We don't budget, first of all, we don't budget vacancy rates. So we assume, right, that a department's gonna be fully staffed because we're very optimistic.
Right.
That department, like for mine, for example, picking on me, I would expect that person to be happy after the environmental education center, but not you. But,
I'm a quick student.
so there you go. So ours, one of the reasons why you see ours go up is, yes, we do have increased personnel costs, but part of that too is I have lap salary in my department. So what I've done is I've allocated my lap salary to cover different things that we have gaps for during the year. So we have, for example, we did a budget amendment. I've moved funds from my department using some of that lap salary to cover a contract for the 311 project management consultant. So we use that to cover funds in other areas. So it's not going to be as clear for some departments. Additionally, like finance, you'll see it has distributions out because they support water, sewer, and electric with customer service and utility billing. So parts of their personnel costs are distributed out to the utility funds as well.
Yeah, so what I'm talking about is kind of the year-over-year increase. Like if I look at a department without any increase in staff, right, and I see a 20+% increase on relay, and what we're saying is like, average comp is going to go up at 6%. Right, I would expect to see a number more in line with 6% than with 20%. I'm just trying to understand what's kind of causing those swings.
So a lot of times, like we had 7 vacancies in the streets, so we reallocated that money to be used elsewhere. Because otherwise it's just sitting there to get swept at the end of the year as opposed to covering, covering other gaps. When we do our budget, we do it based on what the estimated cost is in February for a lot of these things. When we go to purchase August, September, October, November, December, that's not the cost. So we use that to kind of help fill gaps.
Are you saying basically the current year that we're in is really the number that's inaccurate because you've moved money out of your account that would have been shown there to somewhere else? And then for next year, you're projecting actually if you have been fully staffed and that was why. So that, I think that's one of the gaps.
Because even when you're comparing the budget, because the budget has gone down, the expenditure, the actual will also be lower. Because there's vacancy there. When there's a position vacancy, you're not expending those personnel expenses.
I don't think we're talking the same thing here, so. It's not terribly important. It's something I want to understand. I'll follow up in a separate conversation.
Talk after this.
Sure.
I think, because I was trying to think of one example, like, had a position, say in finance, certain salary, maybe had to be hired above what that salary was, that would show an increase.
Correct.
To the budget. So that could be an example too. If there was a position was still allocated, not a new position, a new hire that went in, and with the labor market where it is, most cases hiring above. So.
Yeah, but the swings are huge, right? And so like, I'm just like, there's some rationale behind it. I just don't understand what it is, and I'm trying to get to that understanding. That's all. I'm not saying that anything is doing, people doing wrong or anything nefarious. I'm just trying to understand what would explain some of these jobs.
So this will change slightly, just with the swap out, and then also Felton Grove pushing out. So we'll push out the 2 SROs and we'll update all that information to what goes into the draft that'll be posted tomorrow. Right, we're gonna get it done tomorrow. And then this, also the swap from the 1 full-time position to the 2 part-time benefited positions as well. So this kind of gives you an idea of what those positions are. So you'll see here, we are still asking for the position authorization for the specialists that's being filled by the Lead for NC program. Part of that is so that we have that position authorization, and because the intention is always to kind of start off and roll them into a position, into a full-time position. So this way we're not basically coming back asking for the position authorization. We're going ahead and being prepared to do that. But you'll see we've backed out costs. But this is kind of what the annual would be, but for this year we're not doing that, we're backing that out. School resource officer, this just kind of maps out where they currently are. We still have it pending with Wake County, what they will or won't cover in terms of the SRO agreement. I know Chief Armstrong's working on that. He did increase from just over 37 to 58 with the last contracts that he works through. But it was still 21 for the additional officers. So this kind of gives you an idea of what the personnel costs are by the school type, and then what the county actually cost shares on. This was the information that you had requested. And then I just placed icons by the schools. That's a cool visual.
Is this something that we should get our lobbyists on? Like, because I think at the state level, there's a lot of support for SROs. But every year we're disappointed by reimbursement rates coming from the state and the county.
It's from the county primarily, and there is the opportunity. That's one of the things that Chief Armstrong worked on was asking the county, hey, we have this opportunity to participate through this grant program. We'll do the match. We'll do the work. So they would just have to accept the grant. So you can speak to that if you'd like, Chief Armstrong.
Yes, the last conversation that I had with the school district, they were not on board with pursuing the grant component of things. And the explanation that I was given, an explanation that I always get from the school district is what I do for one, I have to be able to do for everybody. And so it's not something that we can do for Apex if we can't do for every other jurisdiction that we work in. And the entity that the grant funding comes from, when you look at the allocations that come from it, every jurisdiction wouldn't, there's not enough funding in there for every jurisdiction to get a piece of that pie. But until nobody is getting a piece of that pie right now, which I don't think is an appropriate way to move it. So, you know, I'm still having conversations. I met with Superintendent Dr. Taylor a couple weeks ago. We had a really good conversation and really just putting this on his plate of what our desire is in that regard. So that's one piece of the puzzle. It doesn't get us anywhere near to where we need to be when we look at this holistically and when we look at what's equitable. That's largely going to be, in my opinion, a conversation between you all and your counterparts at the county commission. Because conversations that I've had with the school district on this, and what was explained to me is, and I didn't suggest this, so please don't attack me when these words, I'm just giving an example. And the discussion was if for whatever crazy reason, we had to pull all of our SROs out of the program, I just asked the question hypothetically, what would the school district do? And the answer that I got was that they would immediately go to the county commission and then that they would automatically allocate the funds to put Wake County deputies into all of our schools for the middle schools and the high schools. That is their commitment to have an SRO, at least one SRO in every middle school and every high school. And so if it's that easy for them to allocate those funds and give it to the sheriff's office for a county entity, my argument and what I would be asking you all to talk to your counterparts about is at a minimum, that should be a 50-50 share. If we are committed to having SROs in these schools, I think it's fair for us to pay for half of it and for the county to pay for the other half of it. And that's what we should be after at a minimum with this relationship, because I haven't seen this anywhere else in the country. And when I talk to other chiefs about how this setup is, it's almost comical for what we're providing and what the cost share in this is, and it needs to be more balanced than what it is.
I do agree with you, Chief. This is a fight we've been for decades and decades. They're not willing to give. Thank you for that. Another thing I was thinking about to your question, some they still get appropriations from the General Assembly with regard to this, or I think that's another avenue. Wondering about a lot of his still.
Well, so it's the right time to talk about it. So that memo you wrote about the funding share and kind of here, maybe comical is your word. For me, it was infuriating. And I've frankly, I've personally been souring on officers in the grade schools since we did the initial one back when 2018. I think we were reacting to the possibility of a mass shooting. And I've come to believe that school infrastructure is really where it's at as far as preventing that happening. And then this memo, with not funding anything hardly, and if other counties do it much more equitably, was just infuriating. So I personally want to change those over to in the grade schools, change it back over just to normal officers personally. And I'd like to vote on that if we can on this budget. I feel strongly that it's evident that they're not seeing the public safety benefit of grade school SROs by their lack of funding to the towns, in my opinion.
I would say this, we heard from our constituents. They love SROs in schools, not just for that, but the relationships that we create over time. I'll go back to what Chief Armstrong said and the gamble. I know we would do this, but let's say if we wanted to say we're going to pull ours out. We think they're going to put deputies in. Have you seen their vacancy rate?
Well, the other big concern I have here, and this is something that Doc and I had a conversation about early on when we were first discussing this, is because we hire our own and we train our own, it becomes a lot easier to know who's going to be in your schools. Are they going to have the right temperament for this? Are they going to have the right disposition for this? Do they love kids? And with the Wake County deputies, we have zero control of that. It is who it is. So that's something I would consider in this. We're having this conversation.
To address the non-public safety aspects, I think there is value in that, but I think the programs that we do as a police department with the truck touching and the night out stuff and all those kind of outreach things, that is really valuable, and I hope that continues. I think the school thing may or may not be as effective as those programs are for police outreach. And this to me is ridiculous, and something needs to change in my opinion. And I think public safety is much better served by our officers being kind of normal ones than in the grade schools. I think middle schools is a different story because middle schoolers are much more adult acting now than they used to be. And I think there's still a need there personally, and I wish they would fund it more, but the grade schools, I don't see it.
My perspective, obviously I did the job. There's a lot of benefit. I would encourage you to do a ride along or a walk along with an SRO in elementary school and see what happens, the power in that.
If we
It's
continue,
pretty cool.
if we continue voting on it, then I will do that. Check it out. But I'd like to make sure I'm in the minority here on that opinion for the three that we're gonna have next year's budget.
So basically what you're suggesting is that we vote on right now, removing the elementary SROs.
Yes.
Which is not anything I would like to entertain at this time. This moment. You know what message this sends to the community.
I understand the implications here. I just think I want to make sure I'm in the minority because I don't know if I am. I think I probably
I'm
am.
not there with you guys. So an interesting perspective. I think there's benefit of having SROs in schools, even at the elementary level. And just, doing the reading, to kids a couple weeks ago, right? There's a police officer in the school, you see, these officers interact with staff and the kids. There's a positive right there, and I think there's value in that. So, without having some data as to how those officers are going to be used or benefit the community in other or likewise ways, I'm not in favor of making that vote or motion right now.
I personally have never, maybe it's been around, I've not seen any data besides just the positive interaction. I've never seen any of that quantified for these SROs.
Right, again, happy to have the conversation, but I think, without more plan, right? I'm just not really.
I'm not there. And I mean, to me, this is a conversation about, there's a great deal of public support for SROs in all levels of the school. They seem to be doing a good job at all levels of the school. The conversation point is, we are paying a lot of money for a resource that the county could be paying. And I mean, I don't know whether or not this is a standoff where we say, all right, so we pull everybody all out. It would, I mean, we save money, but I don't know what else we're saving. I just don't. And I mean, working with, the Wake County Sheriff's Office daily, knowing how many deputies they are short, I know for sure they're not going to put bodies into the schools. And when they do, they're not putting them in ours because our schools are the good schools. And you want to talk about disparities that'll be resulting. I mean, this is one of those things, and it's, feel free to tell me I'm crazy and wrong, but I feel like this is an expense that we are unfairly paying for, but I don't know the alternative is better.
Well, most municipalities don't do this.
Right.
In Wake
Yeah.
County.
Yeah.
We're the minority on that. They have either decided it's unfair or not effective enough to be worth it. For both. I think it's Holly Springs and us, right? That's it.
I'm gonna concur with, let me just look down. So there are funding inequities here that bother me every year. Continue to do so. And I'll say for the county's level, I think they're just passing through state funds they're getting. I think their funding is $0. That may not be true, but my impression is they're passing through their state funding. That's why I said the state needs to increase. I think part of the solution needs to be advocates of this program need to write checks and match, that's fine. I think what's proposed here in this budget, that's a status quo. Like, there's 3 more, but those are for new open schools, right? So it's not moving either direction. I think what you're proposing, I think it's a pretty big bite at the apple. Like, I think there's other ways we can try to address this first before we take a step as large as that.
For clarification, this does not include the 3 that are in the FY15 budget. This is just existing. Sorry.
I'm sorry, but there'll be 3 eventually.
There'll be 3 for elementary
Six.
schools eventually,
6.
and there'll be 3. We originally looked at 3, adding 3 this year.
One for elementary, 2.
1 for elementary and 2
Still,
for.
one's happening.
Okay, not this slide, but the budget as a whole, we're talking about just status quo, right? There's new schools opening. We're hiring, whenever those schools open, I understand wasn't pushed back, so that's what I was trying to say.
Well, there was 1 for 5 schools when there was 0 when I first joined the council. And there was 1. Now there's 3 for 6 grade schools. So that's $300,000. More than that.
Did funneled through, I don't think Wayne County's adding to it specifically.
From the county perspective too, I do have it on the list, not that it's a magic solution, but I'm meeting with Mr. Ellis at the end of the month. And even hearing the comments of the high vacancies, well, with high vacancies, Amanda and I were just talking, there are vacancy dollars. So while they can't fill positions, they should, in theory, have some dollars available from those positions that's probably our best play at getting some of those dollars from an offset, so.
I think it's not hypothetical. I think there are some schools that do have a county share.
There are some
Yeah.
that do have county deputies.
Be optimistic.
The Dayton's great. It's not. He's not elected.
The
Right, we got our,
new strategy is being live streamed, right? Now let them in on your strategy. Capital vehicles and equipment, so we do have, some minor equipment. Most of the vehicles that you'll see are police replacements. So we will shift some of those police replacements to some of the intention was to shift some of those to the SRO and, civilian, convert them for civilian use, so we're not purchasing brand new cars for some of those positions. And then the 4 for police, 1 for transportation infrastructure development, and there's 1 for solid waste. I believe we're tied to positions, except for the cart delivery vehicle, that's also for solid waste. But everything else would be tied to positions.
Gary, you got your question about EVs here?
Buy more EVs. Are we buying more EVs?
That is, the intention is to prioritize EV and or hybrid. If we have access to it and if there is something that that we can utilize. So in a lot of cases, like with the trucks, if we have to have a truck that's got to tow a trailer, that's not an option.
So what's the replacement timeline here? Is it 90,000 miles, maybe it's feasible no matter what, or? So like, because, in terms of capital, like we're spending a lot of capital on replacing cars that have not even $100,000 or $100,000 on them. Most cars live well beyond 100,000 miles.
Police is,
So why is this different? And, are we better off hiring mechanic, right? They keep these things on the road for about a year. But spending $2.2 million a year. Or $2 million.
so currently we do have, basically what we do is we pull, we have different standards by type of vehicle based on the number of how old it is and then the number of miles. Then we look at it and evaluate it to see how much life cycle costs. So like in the entire life cycle of that piece of equipment or vehicle, what it's cost us, fuel costs, and then we look at the 3-year average and then prior year. So we do that analysis to look at it. So we don't replace every vehicle that comes through. Police vehicles are typically ones that we don't push because that becomes kind of more of a safety issue, right? They have somewhere they've got to get to, and if the car breaks down, that's not what you want to do. So we kind of have those standards that are set for those replacements based on that. If it's a truck that's used to do lab testing or whatever on samples at the treatment plant, that's a little bit different.
So how often are those standards reviewed and revised?
It is on our list for this year, actually. So finance is working to update the depreciation schedule, and then we're looking at the vehicle replacement policy.
Alright. I mean, it just seems premature for some of these vehicles to be replacing them. I drive a vehicle with more than 100,000 miles on it, right, and then, keep it on the road through regular maintenance. So it's a good chunk of cash that we're spending, on this capital focus out of. By the time you're adding out for multiple years, you're talking about the same number in depreciation as you're talking your capital outlay. I don't know, something tells me we can do better.
So, yeah, we don't replace everything that's requested. And we don't replace, we're typically the police vehicles, and then also we have the apparatus replacement schedule for fire are ones that we don't typically mess with the schedule too much on.
Which gets into the next question. I've asked that question before too, but do we need to custom design our fire trucks? Like, and how much does it add to purchase price of a fire truck? I understand it's easier for training purposes and all that if every truck looks the same, but why do we not use an off the shelf, ready to go fire truck? Why do we go through the entire design process? And, again, like, is that a $25,000 difference, or is it $200,000 difference? Like, that would be saving some money if we were to buy stock vehicle.
It's a great question. We actually met with our vendor this week, and we were talking about some stock vehicles, not only for saving money, but getting them faster. And some of those prices were still in the 900,000, so we're talking $100,000 difference. So we know with the increased price of apparatus, we're gonna have to look at what we can cut. Because they just keep going up. Matter of fact, his visit this week was to let us know about more price increases. The manufacturer from components like the motors and transmissions.
And instead of purchase, like, would it be feasible or more beneficial to lease these vehicles instead of purchasing and then fully depreciating them?
Yeah, we looked at some leasing options, some other fire departments that doesn't seem to be beneficial. Be glad to look at it again and see what those options look like.
We're talking about $1 million a year right now, right? And so it's a good chunk of cash. And then, so again, like, if this is kind of the go forward raise, like, I think we need to look at what's our options are.
If I could jump in on that, what I like the idea of being able to give, I like the questions that are being asked, like, what is the depreciation rate? Do we need to have, can we go to a more off the shelf version of a fire vehicle? I mean, perhaps the question should be, rather than every year us looking at each individual unit number on the vehicle and asking whether or not that needs to be replaced or purchased, is maybe push that down to the departments, and then at a macro level saying, all right, you get 1.5. Figure out which vehicles you really need to replace, figure out which vehicles you don't want to replace, and figure out where you can make the cost savings. And if you come in less, then maybe maybe the budget that you get next year is, 1.7 or something like that. I think there's a way we can incentivize, but still give you guys at the department level, Chief, I know what a fire truck looks like, but I haven't got a clue about what goes in it, and I like to let you figure out what works best. And maybe that's a way that we can take a look at refining our budget process down the road. Not this time, not this year, but maybe looking at that as a way of pushing a different way of cost moderation over time.
And Mayor Pro Tem Gray, that's actually what we do. And so what you're looking at on the screen right here, when we looked at the total number of vehicles that met the requirements for replacement, that number was way too high to bring to you all. So we got together internally and we went through all of the vehicles that were listed, and we had our folks go through and check all of them out to see which ones could be repurposed, which ones may be assigned to patrol that we could assign to an SRO that's not putting the wear and tear on the vehicle of driving every day. And so we found, I think it was 6 or 7 vehicles that we could just repurpose and not even put on this list of before, because exactly what you're saying, that's what we do at the level and what you're saying is a representation.
Yeah, and I love the idea of pushing that down to you guys, because once again, I'm anticipating that you are the subject matter expert on the wear, tear, usability, feasibility, and extendability of these vehicles. You know, we should be at the policy level saying, this is how much money we get we've got to play, but giving you guys the ability to say, hey, there's cost savings here. And, I think it's a great example of saying, we're going to take this Explorer that's maybe higher mileage, but move it over to someplace like a SRO where you don't need the mileage. And I think I commend, not just you, Chief, but you also, Chief, in that thought process, because that's how we're trying to make our costs go a lot better.
Yep. Budget makes us do that before it gets to y'all, because they.
Last question for me on this slide. So with the number of new officers and the number of new vehicles, they seem to be very closely related. Now, officers are not on duty 24/7, right? So is there an opportunity for some vehicle sharing that, instead of every officer has a dedicated vehicle?
So, Councilman, what I would say to that is one of our biggest recruiting tools, is us having that benefit that separates us apart from a lot of agencies. And I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we look to go away from that.
Is there alternatives to that might be cheaper, right? Can we give them a mileage?
We do have a mileage. Yes, sir. And so, yes, they have to be within the boundaries of our policy of the mileage. If they live beyond that, they can't take the vehicle beyond that point. So we have it in where they could park it at a police station or a fire station that's on their way home if they're outside of our radius. So we do curtail it with the radius, sir.
Just another point, on the take-home fleet, or assigned vehicle program. We're talking about EVs, replacing with EVs. I think we made that, presented this discussion last time. When officers take their vehicles home, is there a plan? How do they charge the vehicles? Has that been discussed as far as cost, how that works?
That's coming.
Yes.
And that's why we've kind of said that when we get to that point, police will probably be one that last the transition.
Okay.
Even they drive the miles, and not because we understand that they drive the miles, maybe makes sense when you deal with it, but there's complications in how you handle that, right? In terms of costs, equity, liability. I mean, all these things that go into that. So we still have to explore and determine that. So, and we knew we had some time on it, but that's noted. All has come up. We know that's coming.
Just pay them a stipend versus pay the gas, right? I mean, it might be about even.
I guess
Probably.
more about.
We got to explore the different options. Right now, there's not an electric vehicle that suits a police officer's needs. There's might be some hybrids, but there's no electric vehicles that suit.
But
Has a model.
we're speculating, so we have one. We have an EV vehicle right now.
Right, yeah.
And it took us a long time to get it outfitted for patrol use, so we could really test it out to see if it would hold up to what we needed to. So now it is out on the road and it's being tested, but it's not assigned to anybody to be driven home. It stays in town all the time.
Two comments. The first, on that point, I just wonder what Carrier's experience has been. Like, they famously bought all these, not sure how many, but it was more than one. It was like 4 or 5 Teslas or something. That was a year or two ago. Wonder how that's going. And the second thing, we discussed with fire apparatus earlier. I want to hear from the chief about what are your thoughts on the type of fire apparatus we purchased? I know there's kind of a debate over the size of the trucks that some people are having. And with it appears that most departments, focus on the bigger, more expensive trucks. But you may be aware there's some people who are advocating for smaller trucks, especially in more urban settings, but not necessarily here. But have you seen this debate?
So our trucks are pretty common size. When you say smaller, are you talking an engine versus a ladder versus like the different types?
I'm not sure what the class number is, but it's smaller than your typical engine that you see. It's smaller than a ladder. It's more, something that would fit.
So our typical Class A engine, what it carries, 4 to 5 personnel in the front, order the pump, the hoses that's required by ISO standards. We actually have been working to get the truck smaller due to tighter turning radiuses and how we're developing our neighborhoods. But I mean, we're talking going from 35 feet to 32 feet long, bringing it down a little bit shorter now. If you're speaking the only trucks that are smaller, you're talking mini bumpers, brush trucks, and things of that nature.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's not suitable and that doesn't meet the ISO standard to maintain the Class 1 that we have.
Okay, so the class from ISO requires us to have
Right. That's
35-foot, 32-foot, whatever size truck.
To carry all the equipment,
Yeah.
the water, the size pump and everything. So when they come in and grade us, engines are supposed to be every 1.5 miles, ladder trucks every 2.5 mile road mile. So that's based on our distribution and concentration of these units.
So some of the colleagues have asked for a quick break, so we're gonna take a recess for, be back at 3:45. We'll get out of here at 5.
Not yet.
Thank you, by the way. Bodies, no. Yeah.
Right. Right, welcome back, everyone. We're back in session. I want to turn it back over to Amanda Grogan. Looks like we're gonna get out of here by 5 o'clock, so we're looking good.
We're about halfway through. So, hey, the speed at which we go is up to you all. So this goes through and lists out some of the capital improvements that we are looking at, including. So I'm not gonna read this to you guys, because you've got it in your draft. The capital reserve funds, we are projecting 1.4 from the motor vehicle tax. So the fund balance currently of that fund is 2.8. We've got 742 are restricted, of that is restricted for payments in lieu of. That's for the payments in lieu of streets and sidewalks. So we are allocating that out for some of the cost share, and to go ahead and start work on Center and Chatham Streets, which are bond funded programs. So we can go ahead and start getting that through CSX approvals. Recreation capital reserve, we're projecting 1.4. Fund balance currently at 6.7, so we are looking to allocate $1 million of that for the next phase of the program.
Yeah.
I was gonna bold, highlight, underline. But I figure you're gonna forgive me at some point in time.
But that's just digging the foundation. So is the 6.7 on reserves?
So yes and no, it is restricted typically when it's paid in because it's a subdivision, recreation subdivision fees, subdivision recreation fees. So when it's paid in, it's typically reserved for different parks or improvements or amenities in the area in which that development is occurring.
Right. And so is there an opportunity to pool, especially some greenway activity forwards into the capital plan? Or spending some of the money and put it back to, like those sports and tennis courts, building that's, those park and recreation facilities near those,
Somewhat. So we have done that with I keep trying to call it Reedy Creek because we have a lot of creeks, but it's Reedy Branch. Yes. So recently we allocated like the subdivision recreation fees for that. The problem is that those fees that are paid in are not coming close to covering what that cost is.
Right, but, bottom line, we get 5.7 million, that's kind of unspoken for right now. Right, and so it's the inflation that we're looking at, and every year that we raise, like we add 50% to our cost. Right, is there an opportunity to actually, dig a little bit deeper into this pond, accelerate some of these development projects? Right, and either cover, the balance a little bit later, so if we're saving up for a much larger expense, like some road park or something, right? Or do we really want, do we need to keep 5.7 million kind of in the bank?
So a lot of what this has to do with is how we allocate it for the different projects and their location. And then part of that has to do with also staff capacity, right? You can only have so many projects going on at once because right now Parks and Recreation has Angela. So one of the positions. So Angela is not just handling the town projects, but she's also handling the developer projects. So when developers are installing greenways, she's also handling that as well. Part of the new positions for this upcoming year is to get her some assistance with that so that we can determine what that capacity then looks like. So again, sometimes it's not always about the money. Sometimes it's about how far we can go as staff.
Okay, just as a general comment then, like especially on recreation, I'd like us to accelerate some of these projects. That's something in inflation that we're seeing on these projects, and frankly, put this money to work for the benefit of the neighborhoods.
For the intention, and that's one of the things that we did do with the transportation capital reserve as well, but understanding that a lot of our transportation projects are substantially higher, as you've seen from the CIP.
Yeah, but it's like, the fund balance is only 2.8 million, right? And so half of it allocated, so that means a much healthier ratio than leaving 5.7 million and only allocating 1 million.
So understanding, so this is what we're projecting to add. That's the current fund balance, 6.7. So we will actually theoretically add 400,000
Right.
to 6.7, because we're gonna take this million that we receive and use it towards this.
Right.
That makes sense.
So more reason, in my mind, to put some of that money.
I guess what Councilmember Ziegler was saying is there a project we could pull forward this year to use some of that 7 million? Or we have staff capacity where, no matter how much money we have, we need to hire another person for it.
Well, part of that, I guess, will be how long it takes for
Yeah,
Angela.
if you can, I'll defer to Angela on it, because she can talk. So with the green, there are greenways coming up that the money can be used for. We're not there yet. And some of it's capacity and some of it's just timing of design, that sort of thing. And Angela can kind of speak to that. So Angela, did you want to update anything?
Yeah, so what I'd say is, if you look at the way that we submitted our capital program projects this year, is trying to get into more of a cyclical basis. So you have our $300,000 allocated for Greenway projects. And the intent is that we do feasibility studies and we do as many of them as we can in a year. And then the next year, we would take out of those ones that are studied and we have more information, move those into design. And then the next year would be to fund construction. And so the hope is that what we're going to do is move into a cyclical program where we're going to know each year we're going to be adding one. And then maybe moving to others. I also think when we're talking about this coming year, we have a couple projects that like one we just bid, and I just sent information yesterday or this morning, where, the numbers that we had when we made an agreement, with street hockey rinks was before we ever even had all the agreements in place. Now we have agreements designed and we bid it. And so now we have a real number. And so a lot of times I think we go and we're asking for projects that you guys have funded to be now built. And this money has been what we've been able to pull those projects that were partially funded, but we thought were closer to being fully funded. So I think we're working on both of those things, but we have some ideas. We've got some really good grant opportunities with the Great Trail State initiatives and some of that, which might be, we're trying I do have a technician, I'll put that out there, but not an engineer or somebody that can really be out on project sites, but that we're looking at how we could do, again, taking the money that we have or some of what's available and using that to fund projects that are cost shares with grant programs. So we're really trying to roll to a process of those being, like, we'll have a project in design ready to go the next year, and if we can move it forward, then it will be available, because we'll have them stacked one after another. Instead of them all coming what they did this year, which is all 4 of our 10 projects.
Right.
Which was not planned.
But so like we're adding more staff, right? Like increasing staff capacity a little bit, money, all of that, like capital plan. Years from now, a couple of Greenway projects, $1,000 each. Again, my ask is, can we pull some of that forwards, right? Start spending the money now before these projects double in price and cost, right? And get them done, and then again, put some of this money to work, right? Instead of it's just, accumulating interest, which is great, but, let's not build what's the money is way too much forward first.
And I think the one place where we're kind of have a gap is money that's spent for constructing and we don't have plans. And so if we can use the 300 that's in those to build design, then we're ready to construct. But we don't use that money to do design. It's got to be. So I think we're close. We might have 1 or 2 that we could pull, but it'll be closer to the end of the fiscal year versus knowing it.
Okay, so don't have to decide it today, right? My general ask is, can we do more with the funds that we have?
What was that last question, Councilmember Zieglerman? It's really hard to hear you, actually, so.
We just committed to a couple of greenways for you.
Well, I think,
Accelerate
for-
projects where we can, Craig.
yeah, I think for me, I do want people to really understand the impacts of, if we pull additional greenway projects up now, there are operating expenses that go along with that. So, you're not just talking about an impact on, the time that it would take for design and feasibility studies, but you're also talking about the impacts from an operations perspective. So I just want to be sure we're keeping in mind that, when we do build these things, we do have the operating costs that go along with that. So, if we decide to move forward with additional construction right now, we would need to, address those other operational concerns too.
Right. And so my only ask is that we look into that, right, and see if there's opportunity there to accelerate some of the projects on our capital plan.
Including what the cost implications.
Sounds good. We can take a look at it.
Thank you.
Did you read? Yes. Right.
Got it marked up.
Pretty good. Keep going. Let's get out of here as tight as ever.
Okay, affordable housing fund. So we are looking at 1 cent on the tax rate that goes to the affordable housing fund. We don't currently have commitments pending outside of the annual projects, home improvement projects. One thing that came up was the possibility of using, at Finance Committee, was the possibility of using affordable housing fund to start covering some of those operating costs. So that was included in the memo as well. But this would basically cover personnel, some of the operating, and then large scale plan update.
To me, that's a hard no. You know, this fund is to make investments and make it actually happen, not to pay our operating expenses.
How does everybody else feel about that?
I think it's appropriate. I think, I mean, spending funds on staff to look at studies, to work on affordable housing is housing costs. So I think it makes sense. It's not all of it, it's just staff time to.
And this is tapping into our savings account to pay, you know, monthly or not with the savings account.
The savings account's gonna blow up though at some point, right? 2026 or something. It's gonna go away. Don't spend it.
The 3 million for the ARPA. So basically, currently we have approximately 3.8 million that is currently like the fund balance that's in that fund from previous allocations. We have an additional 3 million that's committed for ARPA funds for affordable housing.
Which has to be spent by a certain year.
Correct. Has to be spent by 26.
26.
So,
Are you asking us about that money for the?
so the 3 million would not be from ARPA, but this was to let you know what the total, because that's the total dollar amount, right? So available for affordable housing initiatives currently.
Oh, you're asking about the fund balance that we've been putting money into paying for operating. Okay.
Right. So what we would do is instead of doing a transfer for the affordable housing fund, we would offset those operating costs, the $626,000 in operating costs from that annual allocation. You're still looking at allocating, 1.3 to the fund, adding 1.3 million to the fund this year. But what it does is it removes the 600,000 from the general fund, basically the general fund supporting.
That's what kills what you don't have.
Honestly, I'm thinking that something like the affordable housing plan update, that type of thing, I think that would be appropriate to be part of this because we're talking about, our initiatives within the affordable housing. I'm not sure that I agree with that, the staff operating cost as being pulled from this, so.
Right now, hold on, right now in the budget, it's pulling from this fund instead of the.
It is not. This is in the general fund right now. It was something that we had talked about,
Okay.
at finance committee. So that's why it was,
I understand, okay. I mean,
brought here, because there is money sitting in that fund that hadn't been used. We're talking about, the general fund budget, wanting to put more money towards capital, wanted to do more projects. Basically, that was the offset was, hey, this is something that has a dedicated funding source that you guys have established. It's up to you all how you choose to use that.
okay, thank you. I've always thought that fund balance, the really important thing is if we need to make a major purchase, it's nice to have that much money, but because we have the ARPA right now, I'm less concerned about that than I will be when that's gone. So I don't know if we're making a long-term decision here, just for 1 year or just for a few years or not, but I'm fine with that. I think it's part of the housing.
Of the initiatives that the housing fund is working toward. So, you know,
So you're good with it?
I'm good with the housing plan update. To me, that's part of the initiatives that we're working on. We're trying to move that plan forward. So I think that's appropriate. But not necessarily the operating or the staff position. That's the way I perceive it.
Let me just add another comment. Like, don't look at this the wrong way. Like, I think you need to view this as a positive thing too. The housing staff positions are funded with a dedicated funding source. And we can change that number year over year, how much we give them. But I think from one perspective, it's a good thing that we would say our housing staff is funded by a dedicated tax allocation. And that a future council next year can't decide that in their general fund, they want to cut positions or Richard Town. It has some funding source. So I think that's a good thing. I also think, you know, we have control over the amount. We can set that tax rate independently of the positions. And from principle, like this money is being put to work for housing. So I think it's appropriate use. That was the thing, my thinking, at least, finance committee.
Yeah, and I think we're also thinking in terms of, you know, kind of expand on, we want to try to ingrain this as into our processes as possible. So by keeping it as a funding source, we're basically kind of taking away the ability to dismantle it easily down the road.
So is the thought, if you combine the two things, to have the top two operating items be from the annual allocation and the housing plan be from the fund balance?
Councilmember Jones.
You were thinking, hold on, you were thinking the housing plan from the annual one.
I think what she's saying is, so the affordable housing plan, so this would be from the affordable housing fund. The positions and operating costs would be from general fund. Right.
And not and Terry's saying allocation.
So basically, this would go to be charged to the affordable housing funds. What Mr. Mahaffey is saying is he thinks that everything can go to the affordable housing fund because that's what it's all tied to the affordable housing.
I think none of it should is
Because-
housing.
Yeah.
Because it should be actual housing.
Excellent, right. So like I look at this as our investments, you know, our war chest, you know, to support affordable housing loans, land acquisition, whatever the case is, right? So I feel like we're going to be paying operating expenses out of funds. Like I said, like it's kind of akin to tapping into your savings to pay like a recurring bill. Right, and that's not what you know, what you would say, right? You try to buy it by, you know, right, not to pay your monthly. So that's how I look at it.
Right, but from what Terry was saying earlier, and I think Mayor Pro Tem Gray was also saying is, if this starts coming from that, it's more likely to continue on and on and on,
Yes, okay.
which is not necessarily a bad thing.
So my two things, that 0.1 tax rate allocation, we could change that when you want money. And if there's an opportunity for affordable housing, like if we're 500K short in this fund, because last year we funded a couple positions, like we can take that money out of general fund. So at a certain point, this is how much, not like the beans. Like at the end of the day, the money is the money, the positions are gonna be there.
And it's about accounting and where stuff is accounted from. I don't see us like doing less or anything different. To me, it's just about how it's accounted for and where it's appropriated from. And if opportunities come up, we're gonna do the right thing. Do what we have to do, so.
I'm just afraid that we're bleeding the funds dry over time. Like, if we have a couple of years where we don't make any investments, right, but we keep pulling $600,000 a year out of the fund balance to pay for the, the staff and all that.
The staff are doing things, like they're still working on affordable housing, so there's still investments being made. It's not like we're paying them to sit there and like, or.
You good?
Affordable housing guys.
I was like, I'm in the minority.
Okay.
So basically what I'm saying is I've changed my mind. I'm okay with it.
Okay, so operating from affordable housing funds, 3.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm with that too.
Everybody's fine.
Yeah.
All right, so current unassigned fund balance, 28.8 million. So we do require the 25%. We have reduced this down again, like I said, to about 2 million, which is a little bit more comfortable. Oh, for Antoine too.
But we're close to the policy now.
But we're also, based on projections, going to go below policy, That's the statement.
Potentially, that depends on how you guys want to prioritize projects, moving projects forward, and how you want to pay.
Based on the way that the 5-year CFP plan is paid out right now,
That's correct.
we would not be able to afford that 5-year CFP plan as things stand.
And it's been that way every year. We've always lined up projects in such a way that we have to raise taxes by 7 cents or something in order to fund the actual plan.
Is really the consequence of this long term is that we would be more reliant on bonds to pay for one-time things?
You may, and so there's potential for a heavy reliance on debt. Whether it be for parks, transportation, or even facilities. That's kind of our next step. Antoine and our new financial, we're gonna be doing some debt modeling and coming back to you as we gear up into the next season, kind of start talking about that. I believe Jessica had there's some commentary on that in the CIP analysis about what potentially is coming. Yes, there is potential for bonds debt coming. Now, what we have to look at, what we need to evaluate it is change from the revow affects what our capacity is, right? So we feel like there's some capacity that's opened up, so we need to look at that. As Mr. Mahaffey said, and Mr. Zager pointed out, yes, the 5-year reason we do the CIP like that is so you can see that, again, we just showed you everything's balanced every year. Either you're not getting it done or it's not a realistic projection. So we try to show you the gap. We'll have to balance the budget every year. So what it gets to is what that model tries to show you is you either need to go cut, offset, raise revenue, something to get to that point. Otherwise, yeah, here's what it's going to look like. You'd have to use fund balance. So the fund balance is there. What with kind of, maybe potentially is if we offset, if you take from operating to go to capital, or you delay capital, or you raise revenue for capital, whether it be debt or tax rate, then you may not have to touch that balance. So that's how it's set up, is to kind of show the worst case scenario, and you can think through the options that are there. And last year the way that I kind of look at it, I think about it is similar to what we just talked about with the solid waste rates, right? If we know we're gonna, our crew towards the cliff, then, maybe do more incremental steps instead of, doing one big, revenue raise like 3 years. Right? And last year, that's actually the plan that this council put in place. If you recall, we set up and we decided that, or you had decided that it was 4 cent was really where we were going to try and head over the next 3 years, and that was a 2 cent this year. And then we were going to have the bond, and then it was another 2 cents. So 3 years, that was the plan to get to the 4 cent to start doing some of those projects. Well, a couple things changed that. One, revow and what the effects look like, but then 2, the market. I mean, in general, inflation, the costs we're seeing on everything else. And so that number, and that's in the commentary, the analysis piece, talks about really what does that number really look like now. Also, the suggestion is that we looked at a historical figure on that number for capital spending as kind of just pay-go cash capital out of the general fund budget. And we were trying to get to a 12%, with the thinking being, hey, that means we're doing some things, and it can, but what I would offer now is that might be an incomplete way of thinking through it, because one, as the costs have gone up, you might not get as many projects done at that same percentage, but also because we may have to be doing more debt to get there. A better indicator may be like what your percent, like your capital percentage is gonna be wrapped to that debt too. So may need to be looking at both our debt service percentage and that capital percentage as well, because everything on debt service is capital. So if we're having to do more debt to get those projects done, that'll start capturing it. So it may not just be that 12%, it may be more like, well, if it's 8% on that, if it's 15% on debt, there is kind of a ceiling on the debt piece. So kind of putting those two together is something to look at as well, in terms of considering what that tax rate is. And some of what I think we're going to go through and what you'll read in the analysis is, and when you start talking about what the tax rate would be, you need to keep that in mind. Do you want to keep with that same plan? Is it still up to 4 cents? Is it up to, what does that look like? So.
I mean, I think we're kind of on a bubble, right? Like with the rates that the town has grown and the increase in demands that we're seeing, right? Like it's almost like we're kind of pressing the hill right now, because like we know that's new construction is just slowing down, right? And so we see our growth rate flattening out. And so if this is truly bubble spend, it may behoove us to do more debt-based spending and spread out that cost of those investments over multiple years. So that like we're not just hitting like one big chunk at a time, right? But kind of you smooth out the way that's we increase our expense, or that we basically off that extent over a longer period of time. So I think there's definitely a lot of room in increasing our debt service, right, to kind of get over the hump of the demands, right, before things start smoothing out for us.
So what we're seeing with this budget season and putting everything together is that's likely necessary to do the things that community's asking for, that the council wants to see and do in response. That's why we've got it already. We got it in the works. Finance and budget is working on that with that, and so you will be getting kind of what that capacity is, and kind of gauge tolerance, and so that is coming. Absolutely, we're using this and seeing that that's what's projected for us.
Give you some information for some options.
I like
Some or not.
I like options.
Will this also come with the general fund usage policy that we could develop, where we'll save the really big projects more than a certain amount for some kind of debt thing, and then but we'd like to have some capital, small things like these, to kind of pay for by the general fund. I mean, by the balance.
Yeah, there's in general practice, you're not going to finance everything. You will have a debt. But to your point, wow, that's what we're working on. That's what you're going to see. So when we're not into right now, but when we go into our next capital session, we're all the end of the summer, beginning of fall, we're going to be coming to y'all with a lot of information about what that modeling looks like, where you want to go, because you'll have critical decisions coming up about these bigger projects that are later on that you mentioned, whether it's parks or transportation. There's decisions that you're going to have to make that aren't part of this budget cycle, just both in terms of timing, projects, and what we're learning in the market now. But the next one, and even a couple of years after that, absolutely will be. And so if you'll have some, your planning session in the fall will have some critical decisions for how to do.
Will be almost as much fun as this one. You guys.
Speaking of fun.
Speaking of fun, Finance Committee, we presented the nonprofit funding request. So we've worked with some of the other nonprofits to look at some partnerships with different departments and to look at some other funding options as well. So this was the consideration for the Finance Committee. So they do have recommendations. Yes.
Ed,
So
Recommendations for the.
that I'm happy to send out with the next.
Yeah, we talked about, and I think the thing that looking at these nonprofit support this year as opposed to in the past is you may notice that there's like, some of the traditional ones that aren't there that we've asked to essentially kind of look at moving those resources to say, economic development and looking at things as a different funding source for them. We wanted to focus nonprofit support on the entities that provide direct services to our residents and those who are within our town that we can't deal with, that we just don't provide. So it gave us a lot more of a focused, for lack of a better phrase, focused list of providers that do things for us. And that's why we're seeing this listing the way that it looks, Safe Child. Great example of that is, they help out the police department like so much that quite frankly, I don't want to say it for the public forum, but they're undercharging us. But that's an example of an organization that we have on this list, which is something that we want to encourage that continued relationship. They do something for us that we can't do, and that's why they're on this overall list. And we've made recommendations in terms of how much each one of these organizations is going to get. Not everybody gets everything that they want because there's a finite, pool of funds.
But we're 10,000 difference.
Or 10,000 short.
Not a big deal, right?
Right. Well, we're actually, I think the number that we provided brings us to, we're how much under?
I think 71.8 is what.
So with a little bit of playroom in terms of the recommendations that we've provided over, that'll go out to all of us to say whether or not you agree with kind of where we've come up with some costs.
It's this list, but the numbers are smaller.
Numbers are smaller.
For example, like Carolina Swim Foundation, they requested 10. So perhaps Finance Committee said, hey, we'll give you 5 or 6 or 7. So they made adjustments to this that come under that total threshold for funding. So what they're saying is, here's a recommendation for these funding. This gives us this much money left over. Well, they're asking, I guess, the rest of council to provide feedback about where you all believe that extra funding allocation should go. Is that right?
That way we can, better balance out the amount that's out there. I mean, there are some that are asking for like Kappa, they're not asking for a lot. Not necessarily a place where we were recommending a reduction. And we may find out, as you guys may look at this and say, hey, Kappa's only asking for 12, but we think they really need 15. We've got a little bit of play in order to kind of adjust for that as necessary.
Well, keep in mind this year is special in the fact that there's a significant amount of ARPA nonprofit support coming that actually dwarfs this. Yeah. So there'll be, I think, another round of funding. Is that what we're gonna do? Yeah.
So it'd be 300,000 that'll go out
From us.
July
ARPA.
from ARPA funds.
Yes, we have 78, that's from us, and then ARPA has 300.
The 300 for ARPA will be restricted for capital purchases for the nonprofits.
We talked about where that's going to this council already.
No, I think we already dedicated towards nonprofit support.
Yeah.
And I think we haven't talked about which nonprofit checks. I don't think they've opened up the application period. It'll be similar to this, an application process. Is it open?
It'll open in July.
Okay, it'll open in July. So
We need to get that money out there.
yeah, so I guess I say that some of these projects, who haven't applied yet,
Maybe.
who may be disappointed how much they got, were able to apply to the ARPA funds, but a significantly more amount of funds available this year.
I like the list, I like the methodology behind the list, focusing on really community services stuff that we as a town not provided. If we've allocated 71 right now, I mean, there's not a whole lot more to give, right? So make some of these folks whole, compared to their ask. If we need to chip in another 10,000, that would be fine. This is money well spent in my.
We have a policy.
We have, so just to be clear, we have a policy that was adopted by you all for nonprofit funding, which sets that funding level at $1 per capita. You can change that. You would need to change the policy in order to amend your funding level, which is of course at your discretion.
Just real quick, I want to move on. How many applications did you get this year? You know,
So I think there was like 4 more on top of this.
I think staff worked with some applicants who maybe didn't quite meet the criteria, we have some more information, and the final list of asks, pretty close to our actual budget, so.
And they staff did a great job of actually beating the bushes to get more applications this year than we did in the past, so.
Shout out to communications. So thanks for,
My suggestion would be for the rest of the money that hasn't been allocated yet, if we haven't already fully funded each one, like if we've already said yes to the 1,200 for Kappa, just divide the rest of it out equally. That way, I mean, because it honestly, you're asking for me to choose between helping kids, helping people with meals,
Well, and part of it is also that there are some that on this list are probably more attractive for ARPA funding than others, just simply because of the nature, what they do. So we can talk about it.
And everybody's going.
all right, strategic goal alignments, 424. All right, so strategic goal alignment, I'll let you guys read through this. So tax rate options, so this is kind of what was provided and kind of explained in that memo. What you guys had asked for was up to 35. So what we did was kind of create these different options for you based on priority. This adds back to what was cut from budget. So originally, for example, Angela, to your point, Mr. Zimmer, did ask for additional Greenway funding. We cut that down because those annual allocations are not the defined projects, so we can typically reduce the scope of those in order to fund them. So, so a lot of those, that's what you're seeing here, is that some of that scope has changed. So we've just amended it down. This would have moved it back up to some of their different out, and then, and or over the ask, because we know that we can accomplish that. And or expedite different things like the camera infrastructure replacement project. And then we've tied staff positions based on that priority in terms of what we have upcoming. So that planner position tied to development, upcoming development, and then like park operations staff, because if we're adding that, pretty much usually adding the corresponding staff.
Can you help me and maybe the public who's listening understand the payment management line item? Does that $1 million mean that 1 or 2 more neighborhoods gets paved?
Not for $1 million.
One neighborhood gets paved? Like Scotts Mill is a pretty big neighborhood that's getting done this year, right? How much is that gonna cost?
I think that was a couple million.
Couple million.
I think it was 3 or 4 million. Or might be 2 or 3 million, but we haven't decided. We can get a lot more lane miles if we're doing preservation versus resurfacing. And so we're trying to do more of that. And as a lot of our streets are resurfaced, it's good to get those preservation measures moving quickly before they start to degrade. And you can cover probably 5 to 6 times as many miles with the same dollar with preservation work as you can with resurfacing, and it keeps the best roads in best shape so that it continues to stay high. And so we're trying to do probably a 50-50 split right now between, we're in the next contract between preservation and resurfacing.
Okay.
So if you can do 5-10 miles of resurfacing, you might be able to do 20 miles of preservation. Think about, we got about 240 miles total right now.
I just, when the map's out there, people are seeing, including mine, kind of a lot of red, and once it's done, like.
We got the bond funding coming next year as well, in 2026, Amanda. So 5 million.
Oh, that'll be a big chunk.
That will probably mostly go towards resurface.
Okay.
So you're saying the extra million from you had another penny would be for preservation?
It'd be a mix, yeah, but yeah, we would try to do it as half.
So what does that look like? What is a preservation? I mean, I know what resurfacing is, but when you say you're gonna preserve the road,
It could be
filling
putting,
potholes?
it could be putting down the rejuvenators, which is just like goes on liquid and then it goes away. You can't even really hardly tell it was there. It keeps the asphalt more pliable. You can go and do a crack sealing with filling cracks. Make sure drainage is not getting in. You can also do thin microsurfacing, which is like a 1/4 inch deep, very unimpactful. It's like done in a day. Looks a little different from asphalt. Some people look at it and see, hey, that's failed asphalt. No, it's not. It's not asphalt, but it gives a smooth surface. And after over 6 months, the visual aesthetics that some people complain about, they go away. And then it just creates a nice smooth black covered surface and it gets rid of all the cracks. And it adds like 5-6 years of pavement life. So those are the types of things we're looking to try to do. That answer your question?
Yeah.
So also understanding there's always the option, what you guys want to do in terms of projects and dedicating funds directly to potentially transportation reserve, parks and recreation reserve, to fund out some of these larger projects that we do have coming down the pipeline. So it's certainly, we are open to suggestions on what you would like for us to do.
You, first part of the deck, you showed this slide of how we compare our neighboring towns, our tax rate and anticipated tax rate increase. And it seems to me like we're falling to the bottom in terms of tax rate, which is, a good thing. Right? You see towns adjacent to us being much more aggressive with their rate increases this year, taking advantage of the reval and kind of the lower tax rates that's in place, but yeah. From a finance point of view, are we setting ourselves up for trouble by staying conservative on our tax rate? And so I'm worried about our longer term view here. But, we have our cap plan that we know we're never going to be able to do what we have in the cap plan right now, given the income projections that we have, multi-year income projections that we have. So we know we need to do bonds, even with the bonds added in, right? Early projections are, it's not going to be enough, right? So are we being penny wise and pound foolish by trying to be conservative now, only to incur a much bigger bill later on, like road pavements, being one, right? It's like if we don't do this right now, right, are we looking at a bond for $20 million to catch up a couple of years down the road, right? Instead of just doing a penny or 2 pennies extra now and keeping up with this, right? Is that so again, like from the finance folks in the room here, right? If you look at our multi-year outlook, I want your opinion on where we're headed, right? Are we going for a cliff, or are we, are we okay, right? And then should we be more aggressive like our neighbors are in terms of covering our expense, to make sure that we keep up with the demands and what our town requires today.
I'm not a finance person, but I'll jump in first.
No, that's fine.
Get the
You take the
finance
lamp.
answer. I mean, I think what you just heard too is things are not gonna get cheaper to do. So I wouldn't describe us as heading towards a cliff. But I would say within the confines of the staff and resources that we have to implement projects, as a limitation, it's cheaper to get those things done now versus delaying those items. Heard that on greenways, we've heard that on roads. The more we can do preventative, we don't have to do the full redo project. So when you look at these menu options, we pulled all of this forward. We're gonna get a better bang for our buck now and avoid those inflating costs as we get down the road. So The basic answer is yes, it is gonna cost us more and it's gonna be more of a financial burden. But that's tempered with your philosophy on tax rate, how aggressive we will be.
Yeah, and then, and then the question becomes like, do we spend that penny or so on debt, right? So we get leverage, right? So instead of getting $1.9 million out of that penny, can we get $10 million out of that penny because basically putting it towards debt service? Right? Is that a better play for us than straight up generating cash that we're spending right now?
I think we are, like, we're doing Pleasant Park baseball this year, that's gonna be a significant amount of bond debt.
Right, but that was already, we already kind of factored in it. It's already factored into this plan. With the 32 cents. Right, so let's hypothetically, if we say like, okay, let's take the middle here, 34 cents, right? So we use another 2 pennies. And I'm not saying that's what I'm asking for, right? But just kind of hypothetically. Instead of generating $4 million, right, that we can then put towards more capital projects. Direct staff to put it toward debt service, right? So $4 million worth of debt service, right? Like what does that get us in terms of capital to spend to get ahead of some of these projects?
I mean, our debt service is fixed based on how many bonds we've issued. You can't just put more money into debt service. The way you do it is you issue more bonds. That would cause the debt, but that would happen this year, right?
So like, then that's what I'm asking for. Like, should we
Future conversation.
increase the rate of this? Forget the lending, right? But generate, set that money aside to issue another bonds to start attacking some of these projects.
So for clarification, one, we do have a debt service fund. Two, the only kind of debt is not just bond debt. There is also installment purchase. And then three, I'm gonna invite Antoine to provide some insight to you all on.
Don't feel that we are doing ourselves a disservice. We could increase the rate if we wanted to just build up our debt fund. I can't tell you how much that would get us. Right now, I have to make some calculations to see. But when we're comparing to our neighbors, it depends on our appetite and what we're comfortable with. Going back to Randy's point, we have to also take in consideration the capacity. We could give 2 more cents, but that's usually we don't have the staff and we don't have the resources available to push those projects forward and make things happen. It's just sitting there. And so the money, we're making the funds, but we're not putting those funds to work. So,
Right, so
it really benefit.
you probably that within the confines of staff capacity, right? And so, get it. I guess my question is like, if we have this much demand still queued up, right? And if we're being conservative with our tax rate increase right now, and so we're not doing some of the maintenance that staff is asking us to fund, right? Like, what the 3, 4, 5 year outlook, right? In other words, like, we're conservative now, but we're looking at a 6% increase like 3 years from now, right? Or do we do it, a little bit more stepwise, right? Where we do 2 cents a year, kind of leading up to that, right? And so I'm just trying to kind of gauge, like from staff, like what's, where you guys see the risks or the potential.
So there's always a risk basically to delay something because it's gonna get more expensive. We've clearly seen that, right? It's just not gonna get cheaper. In terms of staff time, I think I could probably speak for most of us when I say it's not like we're ever gonna be like, oh, wow, there's a lull. I have nothing to do today. So I don't think that there's a concern, about that, but the capacity might be an issue. We were looking at comparing to some of our peers and understanding that a lot of them are coming out this month. So we will more than gladly update that information as they present to boards and stuff. It's solely based on like debt service growth. What's their CIP look like? What's their staffing plans look like? What's that cost, right? So if you're looking at that comparison, yeah, that's like this huge range. Like we went about 1.8 cents above revenue neutral. So that's impressive, I have to say.
That's also not even
But
the 2 cents that
it-
y'all
Not what you guys passed.
asked for. And I would argue that the 2 cent may not even accomplish what you wanted to with
Right.
inflationary.
Understand using the offset there. Because that is, one of the things that is kind of hit on in the budget is talking about what those costs are. Water meters are up 40% or ERTs are up 40%. Electric, you've got things that are up. Same thing with, all of our equipment, if we can get it, time delays. So supplies, materials, anything that we're doing, the cost is just going up. So it's not, part of that's gonna be when we get into the budget year, what's that gonna look like? Because this is a plan that we're making and putting together February, March. What will the actual cost be?
That's not even considering the personnel costs of like, how many requests did we actually get? How many did we fund? Half. So, I mean, we really need to think about if we're fully staffing and bringing people in that can actually do all these projects and all the things that we want to do, we have to put more money to it.
I'm comfortable with 33. I'm sold on the idea. Investing in our streets, I think will save us money in the long term, and this proactive maintenance that we can do on the streets, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, whatever it is versus resurfacing. To me, that sounds like a wise investment. I noticed the 33 cents gets us mostly investing in our streets, sidewalks, if we would, they're our priorities we all support. So I'm comfortable with that.
I was gonna go with 34, because I look at that menu and I can justify Mission Zero, the stuff below the allocation stuff, park operations. I'm not sure what that planning is, but I'm sure it's important. So I was gonna suggest that one. And it's a balance of paying too, because it's money from our residents, like pain versus what is important to people. That's kind of the balance we're trying to make here as a council. But that's where I'm landing, I think, is that middle one, because I think those projects, I would hate to see some of that stuff get pushed. And I really hate the wayfinding too. I want the wayfinding to happen badly. That phase 1, humanity, and then the phase 2 is taking a while, but. But I think that's probably a little too much to go up at one time.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the 34.
I was gonna-
Kind of where I'm landing, like, I'm not sure, so I like the list I've ever seen here. But again, like, I'm just kind of curious to see if we can get more leverage, if we do this, like, use it to do a bond issue this year, right, and just put that towards debt service, like, and does that give us even more to work with than the 4 million
Well,
that we're talking about?
the bond, we're talking about the bond for next year, maybe, right?
To line it up with the election and everything,
Yeah.
we would be talking about the version.
Okay.
So
That's what
that's
we've done.
in theory, you could have, if you do these 2 more, I'm sorry, Mr. Go ahead.
Maybe you can say the same thing you said, is that when you add money to your tax rate, that gives you more. That the amount you're allowed to borrow, according to whatever regulations there, depends on how much. So if you raise your debt capacity, so that they're.
Okay, this 2 cents could go to this year, and then going into next year, you could bring those 2 cents into your debt calculation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because this is for capital, it's not operating, so what we're looking at here, this covers that, so next year, that 2 cents is available for either more capital, or if that capital is in the debt. So we would look at pulling that into the calculation, or the analysis for what the impact of a bond would be.
Well, can I ask, so what is the bottom one on 34, the planning design? What is that designing?
So basically, that's a pocket of money because we have a bunch of smaller like transportation projects that's doing like, can be like simple things. One of the things that Chris had, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot right now, had talked about Steph was doing the bike markings, pavement bike markings, and backing into that. So then it's like, hey, okay, well, like, let's start getting these mapped out in terms of like area, priority, whatever else. So these are kind of like the smaller scale projects, and or kind of like an accrual towards a larger project if basically we run into something. Because this could be used towards part of the CSX step 1 for Chatham Center as well.
We
Because
get a lot
that's-
of study requests, if you think about the different traffic signals that pop up, different bike lane markings, I mean, there's a lot of things that pop up every year that Chris's team is then asked to go look at.
Kind of a catch-all for some of that. Expedite things.
I was gonna, can I request that we get a memo or just an email? With maybe a little more detail about these items, a couple sentences, because we'll be asked to explain child race attack into 34, and I want to be able to say more than just Vision Zero projects. I'm gonna list out the projects and say this. That'd be.
Good.
Water sewer fund revenues. So, we are decreasing. A lot of this is tied to the fact that we did transfers this year, 4.1 for the AMI project. We also did some additional funding for the ARPA, projects. So that kind of, other funding source transfer is not seen there. So we are projecting out like the growth rate, looking at 3.6 to 3.5, for both over the next 3 years. So at any point, ask me to slow down if you need me to, please. So we are looking at 4%, water sewer outside rates are double. So that, is minimal impact, for our average utility customer. You're looking at $3.14 per month, combined water sewer. So we do currently have, rate adjustments kind of programmed out over time through FY 29. One of the things that we are looking to do is, contract out that rate study. Antoine, we work with financial consultants to look at, debt modeling for revenue bonds potentially, this year. But then that goes into, so we'll look at doing another, rate study with a consultant, next fiscal year. But that basically, you can kind of see that trend moving, forward as slight increases. We'll also have to look at how we incorporate some of the larger scale debt service and then potentially additional capacity purchase and that impact. So, so you can kind of see that keeps us kind of on track, for the next couple of years to kind of fully fund out, our projects. So you are seeing that, decrease. Again, a lot of that's tied to capital, that's AMI, but also some specialty equipment, for sewer treatment, and improvements, capital improvements at sewer treatment plant.
Okay. Go through.
This one?
Before I, get ahead of you.
Okay. So we're looking at 2 new positions for the water sewer funds, some capital projects basically tied to Old Valley Road water line replacement. So a lot of these are multi-year phased projects. And then we just have some minor vehicles and equipment. Well, I guess not the mechanic truck, but current fund balance is currently 26.9. We are looking at spending using 1.5 for Riverly Road and Old Valley Road.
Question, is the vault the same thing as a tank?
Okay. No.
Vault
we talked about.
is a metering point where we receive water. So currently we have 2 metering points, which are our main 2 feeds. We need some redundancy and we're growing. So we're getting to the, we're not like critical yet, but we're averaging 5 million a day. That vault can carry about 9 max that we have, plus you just need redundancy. So we're relocating another vault.
The water sewer fund capital reserves is funded through the system development fees, capital reimbursement fees. So it is required to use for system expansion. So we are looking to spend just over 1.2 for the expansion projects, which would be the sewer extension and then our partner projects.
Right.
Okay. Is it with water sewer or?
It is with water and sewer, but it's not necessarily what's here. I'm trying to make sense out of the narrative, the budget message. And look at, you have the 23, 24 year-end estimates, and then the 24, 25 budgets, and then some of the words around it. And so, for example, we talk about a 7% increase in rates, but then when I look at the year-over-year estimate, I don't really see that reflected in the actual collections, like the actual collections, actual versus next year's budget remain the same. I also see that we're spending less year over year actual compared to budget. And so to me, that kind of begs the question, like, what are we increasing rates for, right? And to even go further than that, like, we also described that sewer was running a deficit, water was running a surplus, but we're raising rates on water as well as sewer. So, but some of this just doesn't seem like it's jiving. And so, I guess it comes down to, like, we're increasing rates. What for exactly, you know, based on the outlook that is described in the budget message.
So I guess I'm kind of confused about what you're asking. So about the water sewer fund, like revenues for the capital
Revenue, right?
project?
So I'm looking at 23, 24 estimates, right? Your actuals for the year, right? So we stand to collect 25 million in charges for service, right? We say we're gonna add a 7% rate increase. Next year's fees seem to yield this 25 million. Where did the 7% increase go if the number doesn't move?
So basically, this part of this is that the charges for services are not just charges for services. Like, it's not just your water and sewer bill. What all is included in that, you've got the different charges for the saleable water, which comes through, that's tied to development. Then we have like the additional things that you'll see through other operating, that's gonna be like sewer taps and things.
I'm not
But
talking about operating, I'm talking about your charges for service, right? The number is flat year over year, yet we're saying we're gonna increase the rate by 7%.
So I think I know what if you look at the 23-24 budget number, the 23,846 to the budget of 25,505, that's the 7%.
That I get, but that's, you know, that doesn't imply a rate increase, right? Because if our actual collections this year is already 25 million.
It's not, that would be that is based, so that is not what our current is, that's not,
And
the FY.
we're presenting an estimate here of 25 million, right? So either that number is not right, or there's something else going on here.
That's just an estimate. So if you look at our.
I get that, but we're 2 months away from the end of the fiscal year. Our estimates should be relatively on point by now. Right, so what our year-end outlook is gonna look like.
So these are, I think we did year-end estimates as of the end of March, yeah. So part of that would be dependent on what we've done previously in terms of previous years and what those costs are in terms of usage gallon wise. Part of that is tied to weather, part of that's tied to habit.
A lot of times we don't receive billing carry for normal rates, we only receive a bill. So does this include our water purchase? Because if so, then the number that we would have showing today.
He's talking about.
Let me just make a statement and then you guys can react. The narrative, as it's laid out in the budget message, does not support a rate increase. Yet we're proposing a rate increase that you're asking us to. I don't understand why. I'd like to understand why.
Something y'all need more time on.
And we can do that in the second session in May if we want to defer that conversation, but.
That's fine, but I can pull the numbers on how the estimates.
And you know, we can, you know, I can show you like, kind of my breadcrumbs, right, and how I get to that conclusion. Right? And then how we can have that conversation, maybe.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Great.
All right, so stormwater fund. So I've got some updated numbers from Evan. We've got some that are quarterly or monthly billing for stormwater. So there is an increase of 9.2 for that. We are not proposing any changes to the stormwater utility fees. Part of that was that fifth tier that you guys added in January. So we are, balanced right now. We have new personnel. We'll have operating. So we have engineering staff currently. So this will move the maintenance staff under the stormwater fund. Previously, streets, a portion of street staff, was allocated to do the maintenance. Now that they're finishing the condition study, they're finding more, they'll have a regular workload and, work order system for that. So also they're doing Lake Pond spillway repair, Seagroves Farm dam repair, and then they'll start their condition 3 or phase 3 assessment. They do also have a vehicle purchase, which will be tied to the new personnel.
Was the master plan thing, is that in last year's budget for stormwater?
So they're doing, I can't remember. They had a phase 2 condition assessment that they're working through now. So this will be their third, and they're coming up with a master plan, and then that's what we'll work with them to build up the CIP for. Electric, so we're looking at 10.9% increase in electric. Charges for service account for the majority of that because it is the enterprise fund. Factors influencing electric rates, personnel cost increases. It's not just the staff that works for the electric utility department. It's also those staff members in finance, HR, et cetera, that support them. So that personnel cost increase kind of carries through. The addition of the 2 riders, which are $2.2 million. That's the true riders from NCIPA. Additionally, NCIPA is increasing rates on demand and energy that take effect last month. And then inflation. So that continued impact of the operation system expansion, transformers going up over 400% over 2 years. So recommended electric rates. So we're looking at trying to minimize the base rate increase because we're trying to recoup fixed costs with that and tying it more to usage. It gives the customer control over some control over what their utility bill is. And then you'll see on the general services side, we're looking at about 12.5%. That's because the general services were covering residential services. So we're trying to make that adjustment. With the increase, you can see Apex proposed is in yellow. We will still be below Duke. Duke's costs do not include the that they're implementing in October of this year or that they're implementing in October of next year. It does include the rider charge that every customer account does because they can't include some costs in their rates and fees. They do them as additional riders. So this is, and then yellow, or excuse me, and then red and blue are proposed rates for current rates for Wake Forest and Clayton. We do know that they are both proposing increases and are not ready to share what they are yet.
So, so to me, this is the biggest point that I wish I had more time to discuss. Like, this chart is great. I'm definitely gonna show this to people. Things are awesome, but an increase is an increase. Share that many people will see the increase and have a lot of concerns. So can you simplify, you know, in a couple sentences, what is the reasons driving the electric rate increase? How would you summarize? I know there's the true up. I know that I think I remember an email about it, but is it the true up is entirely just increasing costs? Like, what should I say when people are upset about the rate increase?
It's literally tied to the increase in costs. The true up is there. We know, we've got the.
I don't want to oversell the true up. If the true up is like 10% of it, I don't want to say, oh, well, we have this big bill, but actually it's.
Well, so and this is something we discussed in the finance committee, right? Yeah. So we're seeing, because we're saying, hey, we're spending over $4 million on system expansion, right? But electric has also increased those rates. And that's one of those things that you're seeing, like that drastic increase in their revenues for, because they've substantially increased those rates. So they're trying to put those costs back onto the developers, right? So the people that are using that, they're paying for the system expansion. The bigger issues that we're running into is the costs that are associated with the system maintenance. If you look at that increased cost over time, and then part of that is tied specifically to like the lead time. for a lot of these materials. So you could be looking at anywhere from 6 months to 3-year lead time to get equipment. So we have to order things before we need it. So I think part of it is tied to operating and inflation, which has hit the utility funds, I think, probably the most substantially, based on what we're seeing numbers wise, and cost increases. And then part of it is tied back to that true up. Because they basically estimate that out based on what they think our usage or our cost will be. And if we have a really mild winter, then they don't recognize those costs. They don't get that revenue from us.
This chart, I was wondering about the Apex comparison to Wake Forest and Clayton. I've always been bothered by the fact that we don't have tiers for electric like we do for water and other stormwater and all these other things. And it looks to me like they have tiers. As you get more usage, the rates go up because they're lower than us at the low end and higher us at the high end. Do they have tiers? And
So Duke is the only one that kind of has that tier. We used to have one similar to it years ago. But basically certain seasons of the year, the rate changes. Part of that has to do with, I think, less likely to peak demand because
would that explain the differences at the low and high end for us?
so that is tied partially to base rate.
Our base rates, I'm guessing higher.
Yes.
Last year, my recollection, last year, we raised our base rate and lowered our per kilowatt hour. And this year, we're kind of raising our kilowatt hour back to what it was last year. I think that's what we're.
Okay. So there's no, do they have tiers? Do you know, Clayton and Wake Forest for heavy users? Being in a higher level?
No, I think theirs is flat. The Duke has the over 800 during certain seasons and under 800. That's the one that's.
Can we do tiers if we choose to do so? Right, I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle, but can we do that, or are we still constrained, are we constrained by our billing systems again?
No, I mean, we used to charge that way. One of the reasons we shifted was to simplify kind of our rate structure.
I think we talked about that in finance a little bit. And from an equity standpoint, it's not as big a win as you would think, because a lot of these older homes are actually less energy efficient and they do have large energy bills. And a lot of them, gets hot here in the summer, and a lot of people with high energy bills actually have really inefficient systems. So it's not necessarily the case that the bigger homes, I mean, there's a correlation, but it's not as strong as you would think because of energy efficiency. Right? So it's kind of like that. It's not an issue for this.
Okay.
Time of use is, which we've discussed before, is going to be a better way to handle rates. And we've talked about that, but we can't really get there until we switch over to the new system. To Mr. Manhattan's point, energy efficiency, if you look at an older home, like my grandparents' home, all about the old saying was the only way you could really heat the house was to burn it. I mean, you just can't, it's just no insulation, right? So that puts them in a really bad spot. Plus, a lot of those older homes like that, they only have a window unit, which aren't very efficient. So you keep that thing running wide open on cool. I'm speaking from experience. You'll hear that you keep it running wide open on cool all the time, just so you can get some coolness on the other end of the house. So up to your point, some correlation, but I think it would be more impactful to older uninsulated home if we're looking at it like that, because they may be spending more money to get to a comfortable temperature than to get even to a low temperature or high.
That's where I'm going with this, is that I think as we're entering in this period, this multi-year period of rising electric rates because of inflation, because of Duke passing through costs, I think in terms of helping out our residents that need help the most, the number one thing we can do is invest in programs that help their energy efficiency. Because some of these older homes, with these older HVAC units, they can save a ton of money just by getting a unit that was manufactured this year, regardless of what it is. So I think that's something we should look into a little more. I've mentioned before in terms of HVAC carriers, covering energy efficiency grades, but that's I think an angle is going to push is to help people get energy efficiency. There's so much bang for the buck there. Just
window trim, whatever, like there's so many ways you can do it.
Yeah, I was coming to this from the kind of the solar subsidy, right? Like, the $450 we're losing on a solar customer. Right, we're now spreading out over the remaining customers. For making some assumptions here that like smaller homes, right, are the people that have less money to spend. Right, if we can give them kind of like a low tier, electricity rate, and then, higher usage will get kind of the charged extra, right? But those are the people that can afford it. You kind of make that subsidy a little bit more equitable in terms of like people that can afford. Right, but I'm sensitive to the argument that you made that, that may not be, that sort of correlation may not be as strong.
As we certainly correlation, bigger home, but it's not a linear issue with that, because the older homes are less efficient.
It sounds like it's a good opportunity when we do have the AMI system in place to
Yes.
pull that information and potentially, approach those homeowners as part of the Safe X Cares program to help them out and to help the town out. Reduce our energy usage there, so.
I know we're coming up on time. I'm gonna make the same comments on the narrative around the electric fund as I made about water and sewer. There's the way that it's described in the memo here, it doesn't hold water. I mean, but I'm gonna double click on that, before the next session.
So this goes through the monthly impact for Apex residential customers. Current proposed monthly change.
They're got a council meeting going
So
on,
it's-
and they're talking about electric right now.
Eric, just wait for
Yeah, some of the people that are joining remotely. Here, I got it. I muted him. Wait a minute.
Okay, so you're looking at that increase, in purchases for resale over time. So this is based on some of the estimates from McKempo, for the upcoming year. We did adjust them down based on what our usage would be in growth rate. So big things for, electric is the two positions that are recommended is the addition of a line tech, and then also, some succession planning with an assistant director. Streetlight upgrades, 500,000, some fault indicators, meltdown upgrades. Looking at system expansion, we do intend to offset a large chunk of that with the developer paid fees. And then the capital equipment. Current electric fund balance, 12.9 million. Limit is available for appropriation to restrictions. So we do look at allocating just over 900,000. So again, strategic goal alignments. So this is the cumulative, the rate change to affect from the residents. So with the water, sewer, electrics, and solid waste combined, you're looking at monthly different $99.61. The property tax rate comparison, basically because the value has changed, that's why it's set up by the home value and then property tax rate. That makes sense. Usually we do a comparison about what a change in property tax would equate to, but since the value changed, that would be different. Revisions and updates, we are hoping to accomplish tomorrow so we can get the budget posted online for public inspection and get the public notice out. Public hearing is set for May 14th, and then we'd be looking at the 23rd for a second council workshop, and then hopefully still adopting June.
Really, I want to go back to one thing, and this is something you can provide in the next session. On the personnel costs with regard to special events and things like that, has there been an analysis made as far as we're researching options in lieu of using that personnel, like special event companies that provide staff? We try to staff, events that require alcohol, or actually police officer alcohol, so we look into security and things like that.
So Lisa and her team did to look into that. It's incorporated in part of that memo. That talks through some of the different opportunities, like the internship program, potentially utilizing mutual aid for police officers. What's the other one?
There was a question about whether we could hire people to help with trash, and things like that.
Contracting, yeah, so contracting out some of that has not been successful in the past because of certain standards. Town staff typically has to go behind and pick up.
Security.
This is what we talked about with the mutual aid. Doing mutual aid.
Okay, so, okay, mutual aid to be another.
Like basically through, like we would bring in other police departments.
Yeah, I'm talking about
Like private security.
Yeah.
Private security.
Private security. Yeah. That's a cost. Okay.
We'll follow up.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? Thank you.
Let me know.
You're on the revenue.